Chapter 141. First. After the typhoon warning was cancelled, the hospital returned to normal operations. As the daughter of the Himiya family, Mizuki Takamiya naturally stayed in the intensive care unit. Your daughter's condition has stabilized. She should wake up soon. Outside the ward, the doctor in charge of Mizuki Takamiya's treatment said to the tall and thin middle-aged man in front of him, but to be able to survive such a tragic plane crash and only suffer some superficial wounds, it can be considered a miracle. Thank you for your concern. You can go do your work. I'll take care of her myself, the tall and thin middle-aged man said in a rather formal way. Then I won't disturb you, Mr. Himiya. The doctor hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he decided not to offend the head of the Himiya family, who was in the limelight, and left with a few nurses. After their figures disappeared around the corner, the middle-aged man's face suddenly turned cold. He opened the door and walked into the luxurious intensive care unit. Looking at the girl lying quietly on the bed with her eyes closed and her breathing steady, he snorted coldly. The famous Minamoto Gensei is nothing more than this. He couldn't even kill a little girl. As a master of disguise and disguise, his strength was generally not too strong. Not to mention other things, just the Inyang masters of the Himiya family who were hired by his predecessor from the Inyang Shirtao could easily kill him. Therefore, he was most afraid of his identity being exposed. After learning from Minamoto Gensei that Mizuki Takamiya had begun to suspect him, he got rid of some of the people who were asked by Mizuki Takamiya to investigate. He didn't expect that as the main culprit, Mizuki Takamiya, not only did not die in the plane crash, but also mysteriously returned to Japan. Naturally, this made him a little uneasy. If you didn't pursue the truth and acted like a good child, maybe I wouldn't have done anything to you. Now, it's a pity that your face is gone. The man sneered coldly in a low voice. As a practitioner, he naturally wouldn't use a clumsy method to get rid of concubine Rueishi, who was a thorn in his side. He stretched out his hand, and a white creature that looked like a ferret but had a pointy head like a fox came out of his sleeve like a wisp of smoke. Guanhu. For a spirit-branded retainer, this was a relatively inferior species. It was even inferior to Sushinshing's spirit ghosts. For an ordinary practitioner, it was not much more difficult to treat a spirit-branded fox than to kill a mosquito. However, as a low-level spirit-branded retainer, the Guanhu was easy to raise, easy to control, and had many different abilities. For ordinary people who didn't have astral vision, the Guanhu was more than enough to kill them. Unlike ordinary spirit-branded retainers, Guan foxes had almost no physical attack power. The only way they could kill humans was to possess them and suck their life force like parasites. The disadvantage was that this method of killing humans took a long time to take effect, and it was easy to fail once discovered. The advantage was that the Guanhu was easy to use, and almost every onmyoji had a Guanhu. Even if an expert knew that the victim was killed by a Guanhu, they wouldn't be able to determine who the murderer was. Currently, Mizuki Takamiya was in a deep sleep. Even if her life force was sucked away, she wouldn't notice it due to physical discomfort like an ordinary person. She would definitely die in her sleep. However, something happened that shocked the middle-aged man. Just as his Guanhu was about to possess Mizuki Takamiya, it seemed to plunge into a sea of fire. Its entire body suddenly burst into flames, and after a few screams that ordinary people wouldn't be able to hear, it was reduced to ashes right in front of the middle-aged man's eyes. What's going on? The middle-aged man's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't understand what had just happened. What was even more unexpected was that the sudden change alarmed another existence in the room. The ghost spirit named Xiaoxi by Su Xinxing watched everything coldly from the ceiling. Then, it disappeared into the ceiling. Just like that, it left the hospital and flew in the direction of the Shiranui shrine. Damn it, could it be that my predecessor left some sort of protective measure on this stinky girl? The middle-aged man gritted his teeth as he looked at the sleeping girl with a peaceful expression. No wonder Minamoto Mori Seijin didn't kill this brat directly. Unfortunately, he was overthinking. The reason why his Guanhu couldn't affect the girl was that the protection that Su Shinshin casually cast on Mizuki Takamiya was still in effect. Minamoto Mori Seijin didn't kill the girl directly, probably because he wanted to satisfy his villainous desires. If the Shikigami can't do it, then I can only use spells. The middle-aged man took out a palm-sized parchment scroll from his pocket. He removed the rubber band on it and unfolded it. Then, he chanted the runes on the parchment. This was a treasure that he obtained after assassinating a famous collector. It was said that he found it in the underground ruins of the Navia Peninsula. After passing through many hands, it fell into the hands of the collector. The parchment scroll itself was a supernatural item. According to the classification of supernatural items by the Livonian Knights, this thing should be a black magic item. As long as one chanted the words on it while holding it, one could use the corresponding spells. It was simple and convenient. The only downside was that after each spell was used, the words on it would disappear. It wasn't a metaphor, but a literal meaning. The runes on the parchment would really leave the parchment and fly up into the sky like a balloon and disappear. If one was a scholar, they would definitely study the parchment scroll while finding the ancient spell technique incredible. However, for a person like the middle-aged man who was opportunistic, he had no interest in the academic value of this thing other than its practicality. Porn_. Bjork, Gist, the god of thunder descends upon the white birch. However, it was useless. After casting the spell on the girl, not only did he not receive any feedback, but the parchment scroll also exploded into pieces. The man's face darkened. No matter how slow he was, he could still sense that something was wrong. He didn't have much time to hesitate. Although it would be troublesome to deal with the aftermath, he still decided to use physical attacks to get rid of the girl. Since the doctors and nurses were able to give the girl intravenous drips and injections, it seemed that Rueishi's mysterious protective power had no resistance to physical attacks. Don't blame me. The middle-aged man's expression was ferocious. He pulled out the obsidian dagger hidden in his pants and stabbed it towards Mizuki Takamiya's chest. Chapter 142. Crack. After a strange cracking sound, the obsidian dagger, which could theoretically pierce iron, broke into 3 pieces. Impossible. The middle-aged man looked at the obsidian dagger that he had forged with a special method. His heart ached, but he was also very surprised. Injections and intravenous drips were fine, but when it came to him, the dagger was useless. This was discrimination. Was it because of the material? Metal could cause damage, but obsidian and the like were useless? With this thought in mind, he went to find a fruit knife and tried it, but it still couldn't cause any damage to the sleeping girl. Until now, he could be sure that the girl had an extremely advanced spell that could determine whether other people had malicious intentions and selectively accept physical interference from the outside world. Although some spellcasters had already suggested the possibility of such a spell, the man in the past would definitely have scoffed at it. The difficulty of casting such a spell was too high. It was like programming an alpha dog with only zeros and ones. It was basically impossible. He didn't expect to see it with his own eyes today. But even so, this spell wasn't omnipotent. There were actually many ways to assassinate Mizuki Takamiya. For example, secretly swapping the girl's injection or mixing poison into her intravenous drip. If the doctors and nurses didn't know about it, they naturally wouldn't have any malicious intentions towards the girl. The spell couldn't be activated, and the girl would die in the end. Although it was a bit troublesome, if it was done cleanly, no one would associate it with him. Thinking of this, he grinned. Yes, this was the Illuminati. In that case, there was no need to continue staying here. Just as he was about to leave, a cool breeze blew into the room. This made the man's well-tempered nerves tense up. This room was the intensive care unit on the 24th floor of the inpatient department. Most of the time, the windows were closed and the air was ventilated by the air conditioner. However, this gust of wind blew directly into the room from the window. So he looked at the window vigilantly. But other than the window being opened, there was nothing there. After a while, a figure fell from above with a whoosh. It was as if someone had jumped off the roof of a building. The man with sharper hearing than ordinary people clearly heard that the figure seemed to be shouting something when it fell. Chinese? Although he was good at sneaking in and disguising himself as someone else, he could be considered to be proficient in several languages. However, Chinese was too complicated, and there were many variations in the accents of different regions. Therefore, he could only vaguely understand that the other party seemed to be saying something like, "It's all my allergies' fault, I've overstepped my boundaries." After realizing that he couldn't understand the words literally, the man thought that he must have misheard. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he narrowed his eyes. The person who fell down did not stay on this floor. Theoretically, there was no time for him to open the window. Besides, most windows were locked from the inside. Even if the person was like a gecko or Peter Parker, he should not be able to open the window. Then who opened the window? Before he could figure it out, the guy who had fallen out of the window had already climbed in through the window. F***CK, this is the 24th floor. Even if there really was a Spider-Man in the world, it wouldn't be so fast for him to climb back up after just falling down. The young man who came in through the window patted the dust off his body, then looked at the man with a righteous face and shouted, "Who are you?" Wait a minute, isn't this the wrong script? No matter how you look at it, I should be the one asking this question. The man who had his lines stolen was stunned for a moment. Then, he calmed himself down and replied, "I'm the current head of the Imperial House Hariman Jilang. Who are you?" "I'm just a janitor passing by." The young man continued to answer righteously. "Who are you trying to fool? What kind of janitor is able to climb back up to the 24th floor after falling down from the roof?" The man was speechless. However, he was not an idiot. Naturally, he knew that the young man was much stronger than him. Moreover, his trump cards, the goatskin parchment and the obsidian dagger, were both useless. If he fought the young man head-on, he might be killed instantly. So, he decided to play dumb and stall for time. "Who the hell are you? Why are you here?" The man quietly put his hand into his pocket and pressed a few buttons on his phone to call for backup. Then, he questioned the other party. "Because it's too troublesome to explain, so let me beat you up first. F***CK, don't you have to introduce yourself before starting a fight? This guy doesn't play by the rules." The man who had disguised himself as Imperial House Hariman Jilang felt that he was really F***ked up. However, even if he was no match for the young man, if the young man really wanted to fight, he would not sit still and wait for his death. At this moment, the door of the room opened from the outside. "Mr. Imperial House Hariman, I heard that you're here to visit Miss Imperial House Hariman." Tsuchimikado Hariman pushed the door open and entered. As soon as he entered, he saw the two people who were originally staring at each other looking at him. The strange look in their eyes made his hair stand on end. After he calmed down, he realized that other than the head of the Imperial House Hariman, the other person seemed to be the substitute god from Huaxia who had appeared at the White Bell Shrine. "Tsuchimikado Hariman, you came at the right time. I suspect that this guy is plotting against the Imperial House Hariman. Help me take him down." When the man who had disguised himself as Imperial House Hariman Jilang picked up Tsuchimikado Hariman, he was startled, thinking that the latter had called for help. However, when he realized that this was not the case, he immediately rolled his eyes and provoked him. "Mr. Imperial House Hariman, I think there must be some misunderstanding here." Seeing Su Shinqing's half-smile, Tsuchimikado Hariman hurriedly said. What a joke! If they were in an open space, he would have a 30% chance of fighting the young man. However, in this narrow room, he was a thin and weak onmyoji, and he had to fight with a guy who was so strong in close combat that he could defeat Minamoto Shinjin with a single kick. To be honest, Tsuchimikado Hariman also had a headache about Su Shinqing. Previously, during the sword theft incident, he had placed all his bets on this god. In the end, the swords were indeed taken back. However, the 5 national treasure-level divine swords were all broken, and this guy had even used some cement from God knows where to paste them together into a postmodern art. He had almost been beaten up by his superiors. And this time, he had inexplicably gotten into a conflict with the head of the imperial concubine family. This was really too worrisome. In 2 days, he might as well get someone to bring him back to Huaxia so that he wouldn't continue to harm Fuso. Tsuchimikado Hariman, I'm very disappointed in your Inyang Shirtao. Seeing that Tsuchimikado Hariman didn't seem to have any intention of standing up for him, the man immediately patted him on the shoulder with a pained expression and said earnestly. This made Tsuchimikado Hariman respond with an awkward smile. Su Shinshing simply ignored them. He went to the bed and checked on Mizuki Takamiya's current condition. Wait, what are you doing? Completely unaware of Tsuchimikado Hariman's embarrassment, the man pointed at Su Shinshing and shouted arrogantly, stay away from her. Even Tsuchimikado felt that Su Shinshing's behavior was too rash. Even if you have a shameful relationship with her daughter, you can't show off your love in front of her father. Isn't this courting death? Chapter 143. Su Shinshing completely ignored the man who pretended to be Miyata Minamoto Kuro. After confirming that Mizuki Takamiya was not hurt, he felt a little relieved. Well, Su-kun, I can understand that you are worried about Miss Miyata, but isn't it a bit too much to treat Mr. Miyata like this? Tsuchimikado Genji frowned and said. It's not safe here, I want to take her somewhere else. Su Shinshing was indifferent to his words of persuasion, and was about to take the imperial concubine, Gong Rueishi, away from here. This kind of behavior was no different from a slap in the face, which made Tsuchimikado Genji, who thought he was quite shrewd, feel angry. Su-kun, are you determined to be the enemy of our Inyang Liao? He asked in a low voice. No, you are mistaken. Su Shinshing carried Mizuki Takamiya on his back and replied casually. This made Tsuchimikado Genji happy. It seemed that the other party did not intend to fall out with him. While he was thinking about what to say next, Su Shinshing said slowly. You are not qualified to be my enemy. When I beat up your goddess Sama, your ancestors were still playing with mud on the beach. Tsuchimikado Genji was stunned, and then the feeling of shame made him angry as he stared at Su Shinshing. Although the man on the side had an angry look on his face, he was more afraid in his heart. If he still couldn't see Tsuchimikado Genji's fear of Su Shinshing, then his years of undercover work would have been in vain. In this way, if the girl woke up and directly said that she was an imposter, then everything would be over. Suddenly, accompanied by the whistling of the wind, a black shadow flew in from the window. It was the giant De Hei wings on the back, similar to an enlarged version of the crow's wings, and inherited part of the crow Tengu's bloodline, Minamoto Genji. His appearance puzzled Tsuchimikado, but the other guy who pretended to be Mizuki Takamiya's father was secretly happy. Minamoto Genji was the one who called for help, and he didn't expect that he would come in time. Tsuchimikado, you are getting more and more cowardly. You let a foreign goddess Sama do whatever he wants on our land. After this incident, I will impeach you. Minamoto Genji snorted and did not directly attack Su Shinshing. Instead, he attacked Tsuchimikado Genji first. Didn't you get seriously injured by a kick from him? Tsuchimikado Genji complained in his heart. However, if he really said that, it would be a huge blow to their morale. Moreover, in the current situation, if they wanted to subdue that arrogant guy from China, they would need Minamoto Masaru's help. Although he didn't know the reason, after being fatally injured last time, Minamoto Genji's strength not only didn't decline, but also had a qualitative improvement. He even got the recognition of the secluded Daitengu, which activated the Tengu's bloodline in his body. Now, he should be able to barely fight against the goddess Sama of Huaxia. If he can move the battlefield to an open place outside, then he can also fight. With the cooperation of the two sides, at least it should be no problem to scare off the other side. Get out of the way. Looking at Minamoto Genji, who was squatting on the window and using his body and black wings to cover the window, Su Shinshing shouted with a cold face. Humph, If I get out of the way just because you ask me to, then I will lose face. And there is no problem, today I am above the ancestor Minamoto Genji. There is nothing to be afraid of. So in the next moment, Minamoto Genji lost consciousness before he could even figure out what happened. Tsuchimikado Genji and the camouflaged man didn't see Su Shinxing's movements clearly, but from the current scene, they could guess what happened. At this time, Minamoto Genji's whole head was inserted into the ceiling, his body and the black wings he was proud of hanging down weakly, swaying helplessly like wind chimes in the wind outside the window. Tsuchimikado Genji took a deep breath. Although he knew that the goddess Sama of Huaxia was very strong, he didn't expect him to be so strong. In a sense, when he applied to the Huaxia Super Administrative Office to let this guy come over to help, he was already inviting a wolf into the house. Seeing such amazing power, Tsuchimikado Genji's best choice seemed to be to do nothing and let Su Shinxing leave. But in this way, not only would he not be able to explain to the head of the imperial household, but it would also definitely increase the arrogance of the foreign goddess Sama. At that time, the goddess Sama might rely on his strength to act unscrupulously in Fuso, although he was already unscrupulous now. So he decided to take action. Of course, as a practitioner, he couldn't directly rush up like a martial artist. That would be useless except for adding a wind chime to the intensive care unit. The conventional power in his hands was also useless against a natural disaster like Su Shinxing. Speaking of which, since ancient times, Fuso seemed to call the goddess Sama, who acted recklessly and caused disasters, the goddess Sama. The best way to deal with a goddess Sama was to ask another goddess Sama to take action. Tsuchimikado Genji controlled the power of Wutsu, but Wutsu was a goddess Sama of Huaxia and seemed to be of the same system as Su Shinxing. With his own power, he might not be able to ask Wutsu to use his power. Fortunately, as the head of the Yin-Yang Liao and the head of the Tsuchimikado family, Tsuchimikado Genji had a lot of goddess-related collections. In addition, he had mastered some techniques, so it shouldn't be difficult to ask a goddess Sama to descend in a short period of time. Of course, it would cost a lot. Su-sama, I'll say it one last time. Let go of the imperial household, or else. Tsuchimikado Genji took out a string of beads-like things and wrapped it around his hand, then got into a stance. But Su Shinxing had an expression that said, "The wind is too strong, I can't hear you." Thus, Tsuchimikado Genji decisively used a forbidden spell to forcefully invite the owner of this string of beads to the modern world. This string of beads came from the Herculean goddess Sama, who was one of the strongest goddess Sama in Japanese mythology. Although his combat power couldn't be compared to Susanoo, who was known as the strongest goddess Sama in Japan, or the martial goddess Sama, who was known as the martial goddess Sama. However, one of the two goddess Sama had yet to be successfully invited, and even his existence was a problem. The other goddess Sama had mysteriously disappeared, and even his position was floating. "Lowly mortal, since you have my keepsake, then I will do one thing for you. State your request." The goddess Sama's tall and sturdy body suddenly appeared in the room, and he spoke in a muffled voice that sounded like thunder. "Please help me subdue that Mr." Tsuchimikado Genji pointed at Su Shinxing, who was coldly watching from the side by the window. The goddess Sama turned around, and his eyes met with Su Shinxing's. In the silence, the goddess Sama's face became more and more unsightly, and a lot of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. Suddenly, he held his chin with both hands, and screamed like a young girl who saw a mouse, and then with a bang, he disappeared. "Excuse_me. Were all goddess Sama so unreliable?" In order to summon the goddess Sama, Tsuchimikado Genji, who had sacrificed at least 10 years of his lifespan, almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. "Seeing that you have treated me well before, I will tell you a piece of information." Su Shinxing saw that the goddess Sama had actually escaped, and couldn't help but smack his lips. "Although I don't know the situation of this girl's family, I feel that a guy who wears a strange human skin mask on his face is definitely not her father." "Wah!" Tsuchimikado Genji looked at the man who was disguised as the imperial concubine, Miyajihara Kuro, in surprise. The latter was one step ahead of him, and ran towards the door. He had already seen that the strongest in Fusang and the descendant of the heavenly dog were no match for the young man with thin hair who came out of nowhere. At this time, it was completely useless for him to use flowery words to confuse Tsuchimikado Genji, because the other party could completely ignore his words and directly defeat him. When the time came, there would be as many ways to test the authenticity of the skin on his face as he wanted. But before he could touch the door handle, he felt a pain in his ankle, and his whole body fell to the ground. Looking down, he found that the fruit knife he had used to stab Mizuki Takamiya was stuck in his ankle at some point. Understood, I will investigate carefully. I am sorry about today's matter. The imperial concubine's strange behavior just now had made it clear that Su Shinshing's words were reliable. Tsuchimikado Genji frowned and apologized to Su Shinshing, and no longer stopped him from taking Mizuki Takamiya away. Instead, he threw out a handful of talismans, summoned many palm-sized paper men, and carried the goddess Sama out. Su Shinshing didn't answer him. He just looked at the sleeping girl behind him, and then jumped out of the window. Chapter 144. So you made a scene at the hospital and brought Big Sister back just like that? In the White Bell Shrine, Wu Yejin looked at Su Shinshing with a speechless expression. The doctor said she's fine. Su Shinshing shrugged, other than needing to rest, there's only the problem of her memory. It's better to say that that's the big problem. Wu Yejin sighed, her little face was gloomy, Sister Fei Gong who treats you as her father. Although that scene is unimaginable, it's too scary. No, if Fei Gong's memory recovers, it will be more troublesome. Chihaya Fukuyama, who knew some inside information, wanted to say something, but felt that it would only add to the trouble, so he simply ignored it and continued to practice the control of his divine power. Perhaps for ordinary people, the memory problem is indeed a bit tricky, but don't forget that there are no ordinary people here. Su Shinshing raised his finger and said aloud. No, I'm still an ordinary person. Wu Yejin retorted in her heart. But thinking about it carefully, she seemed to have been a magical girl, fake, so in a sense, she wasn't an ordinary person. Then, how does Mr. Monkey plan to solve it? So Wu Yejin simply sat down on the short table and stared condescendingly at Su Shinshing who was sitting on the tatami and asked. Mr. Monkey? Mo Lee, who was nibbling on a scallop, canned herring flavor, tilted his head, and his cute little face showed an imperceptible curious expression, as if he was wondering how Su Shinshing's alias came about. Su Shinshing coughed dryly and didn't answer Mo Lee's question. He just skillfully changed the topic. A disease that humans can't do anything about, but for other kinds of creatures, it may just be a cold-level illness. Other kinds of creatures. Ah, could it be? Wu Yejin's eyes lit up as if she thought of something. Gods. Su Shinshing seemed to know what she wanted to say. He nodded and admitted, although those guys are not very powerful, sometimes their strange abilities are quite effective on ordinary people. But there aren't many gods left in this era. At first, Hana Kyuan was abducted by Su Shinshing. But recently, she had adapted to the atmosphere of the White Bell Shrine. Indifferently, she poured cold water on everyone. To be honest, it's incredible that two gods, you and Senpai Kamiyama, appear in the same shrine at the same time. As far as I know, the most recent sighting of two gods appearing at the same time can be traced back to the 20th of May, 9 years ago, at the Shiya Taisha branch. Ah, I see. Five-Leaf Pansy came to a realization. Due to the fact that she had seen a lot of gods in the past, the girl's cognition had yet to recover. She still thought that gods were everywhere. It's alright, I've already used my connections, physics, to ask about how to get to Takamajiehara in this era. Now, we just need to go up again. Su Shinshing didn't care about this. Doing what he thought had always been a virtue that he was proud of. Without waiting for others to express their opinions, he ran out of the shrine like a gust of wind and disappeared from everyone's sight. Not long after, he appeared in front of everyone with a white parrot that looked like it would die at any time. By the way, when he arrived at Takamajiehara, the Heavenly Hand man thought that Su Shenxing had come to settle accounts with him. He screamed and ran away, hiding somewhere. It was said that when the gods of Takamajiehara saw him again, it was already hundreds of years later. Now I finally understand why Miss Wuye refused to take the hero high-speed train again. The debate bird's face was sad. He lay on the ground and muttered with a voice full of despair. Long time no see, debate bird. Wu Yejin greeted him affectionately. Miss Wuye is also here. Only then did eloquent genius sit up. Although it was quite comical for him to sit like a bird on the ground. Mr. Landlord, Emily looked at debate bird, then turned around and softly called Su Shenxing. You can't eat it. Su Shenxing, who understood her intentions, immediately warned her. What a pity. So Emily could only continue to eat the shellfish. Hanakoto Yuyuan and Chihaya Fukuyama looked at the parrot curiously. Is this also a god? Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't help but ask. My name is Debate Bird, one of the 8 gods of fortune. The parrot proudly answered. I suddenly feel desperate about the Japanese gods. Hanakoto Yuyuan looked at the parrot like a clown and couldn't help but mutter. In short, Su Shenxing told Debate Bird about his request, and Debate Bird said that there was no problem. As a god who controlled water and knowledge, originally, he had wisdom, but after turning into a bird's brain, he didn't talk about this sad topic. It was not difficult for Debate Bird to modify the memory of ordinary people. So everyone went to the room behind the shrine. It was originally the living room of the original owner of the shrine, Yakumo. However, after Asahi Sakura Kanji moved to Chihaya Fukuyama's house, no one used it. Now, Mizuki Takamiya could rest. Sakura Kanji, who was looking after Mizuki Takamiya, saw everyone come here and couldn't help but ask curiously what happened. Su Shenxing briefly explained the situation. At the same time, Debate Bird, who had turned into a parrot, also did a simple check on Mizuki Takamiya's condition. You mean, you want to modify her memory to normal, right? Debate Bird asked Su Shenxing. Yes, what's wrong? Because her memory of you and her memory of her father are intertwined. If you want to change it, it will cause a certain degree of damage to her memory. Debate Bird said seriously, you can keep her memory of you as her father and completely forget her original father. Or you can keep her memory of her father and completely forget you. You can only choose one of the two. I choose the latter. Su Shenxing said without hesitation. Debate Bird was a little surprised. To be honest, her memory of her original father is not a happy thing. And if you are willing to accept her as your cheap daughter, then there is no doubt that Phimea Financial Group will be under your name. Although you may not know this cheap daughter is very capable. The directors of the financial group are no match for her. Debate Bird stared into Su Shenxing's eyes and continued, sometimes, some white lies can make everyone happy. Even so, do you still want to choose the second option? You are so noisy. Su Shenxing dug his ears and said, just do as I say. Dividing line, in the end, Debate Bird still did as Su Shenxing said and modified Mizuki Takamiya's memory to normal, only the part related to Su Shenxing was missing. Why don't you do as the parrot god said? After returning home, Hanakeu and Yuyuan asked Su Shenxing curiously, I remember that you are short of money. Su Shenxing was silent for a moment and then sighed, because for the current me, except for power, the treasures of the past are only memories of the past. Hanakeu and Yuyuan could not help but be quiet after hearing what he said. After a while, she looked at Su Shenxing who was stuffing things into his backpack and asked, what are you doing now? Packing. Su Shenxing smiled freely, showing 8 teeth, and said, I'm going home. Chapter 145. Ha, Xiao Jingyi, who was driving, yawned loudly. Senior, did you not sleep well last night? Fang Xiaoqing couldn't help but ask curiously. More or less. Taking advantage of the red light, Xiao Jingyi wiped his eyes with his free hand. Although he had asked Su Shenxing to give him protection, recently, because of the increasingly rich spiritual energy in the house, it had become more chaotic. Other things aside, Xiao Jingyi would lean on the sofa in front of him every day when he came home. Then it would twist its body like a huge caterpillar and ask in a low and rough voice, "Master, do you want to eat first, take a bath first, or fuck me first?" While making poor Xiao Jingyi feel nauseous, he regretted buying this fake leather sofa more than once. Thanks to them, Xiao Jingyi hadn't slept well for several days. "I heard that drinking a glass of milk before going to bed can improve the quality of your sleep," the girl kindly suggested. "Is that so?" Xiao Jingyi yawned again and answered casually. In his current situation, sleeping pills might be more effective than milk. She found that Xiao Jingyi didn't seem to want to talk about this topic, so Fang Xiaoqing, who was beginning to understand the situation, tactfully changed the topic. "Speaking of which, are we going to the city museum now? What's the job this time?" Some time ago, there was an exhibition in Fusang, and it seemed to be quite a big deal. There was a special exhibition of national treasures. The people at the top felt that Huaxia is a great country with a history of 5,000 years, eat my socialist money attack, oh, this is good for political achievements, and so on. They also organized a traveling exhibition, and the current stop is Jiangjin. Xiao Jingyi cheered up a little and explained to the girl, because the exhibition includes some exhibits that may be supernatural objects, our special case investigation team was asked to cooperate with the security personnel. "What about the case we were investigating before?" Fang Xiaoqing frowned and asked. Before this sudden job, the members of the special case investigation team, mainly her and Xiao Jingyi, were investigating a missing person case. At first, they thought it was just some problems left over from the previous serial kidnapping case, but during the investigation, other victims appeared. Obviously, this was a new case. Unfortunately, without Su Xinxing, Xiao Jingyi, and the others not only couldn't contact the Earth God to seek clues, but even the investigation was difficult to carry out smoothly. It didn't take long for them to reach a dead end. It was not easy to find some clues, but at this juncture, they were transferred to guard the exhibition by the higher-ups. Naturally, Fang Xiaoqing felt very angry. "I heard that the case is, it was a normal human crime, and it had nothing to do with the supernatural." "What?" said Xiao Jingyi, "and we really didn't find anything supernatural in the case, I know that too, but I just feel very unhappy." Fang Xiaoqing was still a little indignant when she talked about it. "This is society, young lady. Senior, you're not much older than me, I just have a tender face, but I'm actually quite old, right? But I still don't have a girlfriend. Life is hard." Xiao Jingyi's face was full of tears. Dividing line, when they arrived at the city museum, Su Feng and Antares were already there, talking to an old man. "Oh, you're finally here." After seeing Xiao Jingyi and the others arrive, Su Feng waved to them. "This is the curator of the city museum, a famous historian in Jiangjin, Mr. Yuan Yuzhuang." "Hello, Mr. Yuan." Xiao Jingyi and Fang Xiaoqing hurriedly greeted him. However, the old man just nodded and turned his gaze back to Su Feng. "That's it, team leader Su. I still have a charity auction to attend, so I won't chat with you anymore." After saying that, he left in the car, not giving Su Feng and the others any chance to talk. "Team leader, how did I offend Mr. Yuan?" Xiao Jingyi scratched his head, feeling that the old man didn't seem to like him. "It's not that you offended Mr. Yuan, but that old man doesn't like our special case investigation team. It's said that because he's an extremely firm materialist, he has never seen any supernatural phenomenon in his life, so he doesn't believe that there is such a supernatural power in the world. Therefore, in his eyes, we're almost the same as scammers." Su Feng didn't care about this. As a member of the super administrative office, he had seen many people who had the same understanding as Mr. Yuan. "In short, let's go take a look at the things we're mainly protecting this time." With that, Su Feng led the two of them into the museum, leaving only Antares, who was playing Capsule Monster Go on his phone, guarding the door. As a native of Jiangjin, Xiao Zhengyi had naturally been to the city museum before. However, there were obvious changes in the museum now. The most eye-catching thing was that the armillary sphere that originally stood in the middle of the museum had been replaced with a huge stone, and there was a sword stuck in the stone. The style of the sword was somewhat similar to the Yuan sword, but the material used seemed to be more exquisite. It looked shiny and didn't feel like an antique at all. A young girl was placing a nameplate on the stone. Xiao Zhengyi glanced at it and found that the words, Yuanrong sword, were written on it, but the description below was too small to read clearly. However, at this time, the girl who was placing the nameplate and suspected to be a staff member also noticed Xiao Zhengyi and the others. Ah, team leader Su, hello. These two are. She looked at Xiao Zhengyi and Fang Xiaoqing behind Su Feng in confusion. They are members of our group. This guy is called Xiao Zhengyi. If there's any physical work, just leave it to him. And this is Fang Xiaoqing. You guys are about the same age, so you can interact more. Su Feng introduced them as if they were familiar with each other, then said to Xiao Zhengyi and the others, this is the main person in charge of this exhibition, Miss Yuan Shiyu. After everyone got to know each other, they chatted about various issues. Not long after, the topic of conversation turned to the Yuanrong sword. Ah, that's a lie. Yuan Shiyu waved her hand. The Yuanrong sword was lost in the Han Dynasty. This is an ancient sword that was unearthed not long ago. After carbon-14 identification, this thing was at the earliest an item from the Republic of China. It should be an imitation of the Yuanrong sword in ancient books, so it's not worth much. However, it's true that this thing can't be pulled out. We even used some machinery before, but we couldn't get it out of the stone. In the end, a member of the working group proposed to put it in the exhibition to attract popularity. The way to attract popularity was very simple. It was to let the tourists pull this thing out themselves. If they pulled it out, the sword would be given to that person. In the previous exhibition, many tourists were very interested in this. It was just that no one could pull it out. Let me ask, how much is the so-called not worth much? Su Feng suddenly asked. The market price is about 10,000 to 30,000. Yuan Shiyu didn't understand and answered. Justice, remember not to tell your friend about this. Su Feng touched his forehead and sighed. Ah. Xiao Zhengyi naturally understood what Su Feng meant. If Su Xinxing knew about this, he would probably immediately come over to pull the sword out. Even if he really couldn't pull it out, according to that guy's temper, he would probably directly break the stone in half or something, but then Xiao Zhengyi heard another thing from Su Feng's words. Boss, are you saying that old Su is coming back? Yes, it said that Fu Sang's Yin Yang Liao is now holding a fireworks festival to celebrate. What on earth did that guy do in Fu Sang? By the way, Mr. Xiao Zhengyi, do you want to give it a try? Yuan Shiyu pointed at the sword on the stone and invited Xiao Zhengyi. Boss, have you tried? Xiao Zhengyi asked Su Feng. I tried, but I couldn't pull it out. This thing is a bit strange. Su Feng frowned but didn't say much. This made Xiao Zhengyi a little nervous, but he also had the impulse to give it a try. In the end, he felt that Su Feng was there and nothing would happen, so he boldly came to the stone, held the hilt with both hands, and carefully lifted it. Maybe there was a slight deviation in the strength, but Xiao Zhengyi only felt that his hands were lighter. It was as if he had broken a plastic foam board from the hilt. Ah, a treasured sword that was worth tens of thousands of dollars was broken into two halves in front of everyone's eyes. Alright, not counting Xiao Zhengyi himself, there were only 3 people present. Chapter 146. After being stunned for a long time, Su Feng patted his head. By the way, the criminal police brigade still has a meeting. Then he turned around and was about to leave. Wait a minute. Xiao Zhengyi wanted to cry but had no tears. He shouted at Su Feng, didn't you say that this thing can't be pulled out? Nonsense, you didn't pull it out either. It's just that I broke it. Then can I get reimbursed? At least it's a work injury or something. Injury my ass, the bureau doesn't have any surplus food recently. Su Feng grinned and showed a toothache expression. In short, don't even think about it. Fang Xiaoqing looked at the two men with a puzzled face and asked strangely, although I don't quite understand what's going on, it's just a small matter that Senior Xiao damaged the exhibit, right? At most, you just have to pay for it, right? Don't make it sound so simple, I don't have the money to pay for it. Xiao Zhenyi's momentum suddenly plummeted, and he said weakly, now it's already very difficult for me to maintain my daily expenses with my little salary. Although Su Feng didn't really deduct his year's salary for the previous incident, it was still not enough. However, this didn't mean that Xiao Zhenyi's life was very good recently. Now, his family was like a group of demons dancing wildly, it was as if there were more than 100 energetic huskies at home. Every day, the first thing Xiao Zhenyi did when he returned home was to check what was not working today. Even with the bureau's subsidies, he couldn't afford to spend so much. Therefore, although he wasn't as miserable as Su Xinxing for the time being, Xiao Zhenyi's life wasn't very good either. If it's only about 30,000, I can help you pay. Fang Xiaoqing suggested. To her, who was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, 30,000 RMB was just an insignificant amount. Well, let's just say I borrowed it from you, I'll pay you back when I get my next salary. Although Xiao Zhenyi understood that Fang Xiaoqing meant to help him pay back the money directly and didn't need credit or anything, out of the self-esteem of a man and a senior in the workplace, Xiao Zhenyi still couldn't thicken his skin to accept the other party's kindness. Senior, you don't have to mind it so much. Although Fang Xiaoqing wasn't clear about Xiao Zhenyi's current situation, she could see some clues from his recent lifestyle. No, if I accept your charity so easily, then we can't even be friends. Xiao Zhenyi shook his head solemnly. For some reason, he thought of Su Xinxing, who used to live in an apartment. Even when Su Xinxing was in the most difficult times, he never asked for a penny from Xiao Zhenyi. They only exchanged money when they were working. This was also why Xiao Zhenyi admired Su Xinxing the most. He was well aware of Su Xinxing's power. If he wanted to make money, he could easily get a large sum of money in a short period of time. At least, there was no one in Jiangjin City who could stop him. But even so, even if he could only squeeze in the same bed with Lolita to warm himself at home, Su Xinxing didn't use any illegal means to get even a penny to improve his life. It was precisely because he had been with such a guy for a long time that even Xiao Zhenyi couldn't help but be infected by him. Under his silly appearance, he had his own pride. You two over there, don't do any office romance under my nose. Su Feng, who had once participated in an unknown underground organization, didn't hesitate to stand up and break them up. If you continue to show off your love in front of me, Xiao Zhenyi, starting tomorrow, you'll clean the toilet for me. We're not showing off our love. Why do you want me to clean the toilet? Fang Xiaoqing and Xiao Zhenyi spoke at the same time. The former was shy, while the latter was simply complaining with a black line on his face. Actually, you don't need to compensate. Yuan Shiyu, who had been watching the show from the beginning, said, because this was originally just a gimmick. Compared to the other exhibits, it's not worth much. It doesn't matter even if it's removed. And you also helped us avoid the embarrassment of this sword being broken as soon as we opened the door. Let's call it even. Perhaps it was because the budget for this exhibition was more than enough, but Yuan Shiyu seemed very generous. Even Xiao Zhenyi felt that her face was as round and kind as the Guanyin Bodhisattva. If you really have the heart, then contact the traffic police's towing team and drag this useless stone away. That's not a problem. When Su Feng heard that he didn't need to compensate, he became more proactive. He patted his chest and said, leave it to me. It seemed that the super administrator didn't have much money. This also made Xiao Zhenyi a little worried about his future. Then what about this sword hilt? Xiao Zhenyi raised the remaining half of the sword hilt in his hand. You can take it out. Whatever you like. Yuan Shiyu shrugged. This thing doesn't have much research value. If you really don't like it, you can throw it in the trash can. But I think it should be sold at an ordinary auction for 2 to 3,000 yuan. Oh, then I won't be polite. Only then did Xiao Jingyi happily put away the sword hilt. Even if this thing didn't have much research value, it had a great shape and was full of simple oriental charm. If he casually bought a knife holder and put it in his home, it would be an excellent decoration. And it was worth 2 to 3,000 yuan. When the time came, he could take it to an apartment to show off to Su Xinxing, dividing line. After familiarizing himself with the distribution of the preserved items with Yuan Shiyu, Su Feng announced that he could get off work. After Xiao Jingyi returned home with the sword hilt, he suddenly remembered that the concentration of spiritual energy in his house seemed to be abnormal. He didn't know if it would affect this broken sword in any way. So he simply held the sword in his hand and carefully observed it. Previously, the sword was stuck in a big rock, so he couldn't see it clearly. Now, under the fluorescent lights in his house, it could be considered as clear as day. He didn't know what material the sword hilt was made of. It was cold to the touch and felt quite heavy, like marble. The blade was black, but according to Yuan Shiyu, there was no poison on the blade. Instead, it was coated with a layer of black paint, mainly composed of chrome, to prevent rust. The whole sword had an indescribable charm, until a crack appeared on the blade. That broken mark suddenly appeared in the middle of the sword, giving people a strange and uncomfortable feeling. If an example had to be given, it was like suddenly stopping in the middle of urinating. It made people feel like they were in heaven and wanted to die. Just as Xiao Jingyi was about to carefully examine it, black fog suddenly began to overflow from the blade. Then, something came out of the sword along with the fog. Chapter 147. Although, in a sense, it was expected that something would come out of this kind of antique, Xiao Jingyi was still shocked when he actually encountered it. It's fogging up. The demons in the house discussed fervently. Smoking is prohibited indoors. Microwave, who wanted to be a little boss, advised righteously. Eat first, take a shower first, or... The sofa quietly approached Xiao Jingyi's blind spot. The air quality is really deteriorating recently. The refrigerator was as impassioned as a critic. At that time, I pretended to be looking around. The TV switched to its favorite channel to entertain itself. Oh, supernatural phenomena are so scary. The table lamp and the rice cooker hugged each other and trembled. Seeing this scene, Xiao Jingyi immediately calmed down. No matter how bad it was, it couldn't be worse than now. In the black fog, a figure gradually took shape. If one had to describe her in one sentence, it would probably be a flat-chested version of Sadako. Its whole body trembled for a while, then it looked down at its hands and body, then noticed Xiao Jingyi in front of it. Without waiting for Xiao Jingyi to try to communicate with it, it opened its mouth and rushed toward Xiao Jingyi with a scream. Mortal, give me your body. What the F***ck? Fortunately, Xiao Jingyi didn't forget the skills he had trained in the police academy these days. He almost subconsciously lowered his head and rolled, avoiding the attack. Then, the ghost-like thing directly hit the fake leather sofa that was about to approach Xiao Jingyi from behind. The sofa was like a girl who bumped into a mouse. It screamed shrilly and ran wildly in the small room. The room that was tidied up with great difficulty immediately became a mess. Xiao Jingyi, who was originally nervous because of the ghost-like thing, was suddenly speechless because of the supernatural scene in front of him. To be honest, the situation was not good. With such a noisy situation, there must be someone upstairs who would protest, right? Was he going to tell the other party that his sofa had gone out of control and was running around like an energetic Labrador, causing such a big commotion? If he really said that, he would probably be invited to the mental hospital for tea the next day. While Xiao Jingyi was running wild in his mind, the ghost finally broke free from the sofa's restraints and crawled out. You've actually raised so many demons. Looks like you're not a good person either. This way, I won't have to worry about possessing your body. He didn't know what it had experienced on the sofa, but its originally smooth hair was now as messy as a bird's nest, and its neat clothes were also messy. As soon as it saw Xiao Jingyi, it gritted its teeth and pounced on him again. Although Xiao Jingyi usually had a good temper, he wasn't the kind of person who wouldn't fight back. Seeing that the other party had tried to kill him time and time again, he naturally became angry. Relying on the fact that he had the 50-cent bracelet plus 2 foot, which was suspected to be an epic equipment, he rolled up his sleeves and punched the other party's face that was covered by its hair. Sure enough, as he expected, his hand felt like it had hit something solid. And the other party seemed to have suffered additional damage, as it screamed and flew back into the sofa. As a result, Sofa, who was still panting heavily from the shock, immediately began to run all over the floor. After finally calming down the sofa and dragging the other party out, the other party seemed to have suffered considerable psychological damage. The whole ghost hugged its knees and curled up into a ball, muttering to itself, "The human world is so scary, I want to go home," or something like that. How should he put it? He felt that it was a bit pitiful. Parting line, while Xiao Jingyi was still worrying about how to deal with the ghost that floated out of the broken sword, in Jiangjin City's airport, a plane from Japan slowly landed on the runway. After the plane heard the news and set up a ladder, the passengers on the plane came down one after another. Among them, the most eye-catching was the group of a man and 2 women. The man looked like he was airsick, his face was ugly, and he was supported by a girl who looked much younger than him. There was also a little girl who was holding a vomit bag as if there was no one else around. Although her face was expressionless, anyone could tell from her face that, "Are you going to vomit? Are you going to vomit?" They were naturally Su Xinxing and the others who came back from Japan. However, compared to only Su Xinxing and Emoli when they went to Japan, now there was one more person who came back, Chihaya Fukuyama. Originally, after Chihaya Fukuyama activated the dragon god's bloodline in her body, in theory, she should have taken up a position in Japan's divine system. After gaining enough faith, it was not impossible for her to even go to Takamagara. But the problem was that there was an incomplete god of Huaxia in her body, and compared to the mottled and impure dragon god, the power of this god of war was more powerful and purer. So, after the girl, who was unaware of this, practiced for a period of time to use the divine power, the increasingly powerful god of war naturally swallowed up the god of the dragon god. As a god of Huaxia, naturally, she could not stay in Japan forever. Even if Chihaya was willing, Japan's divine kingdom would not allow this to happen. So, after negotiating, Chihaya Fukuyama could only follow Su Xinxing to Huaxia to settle down. As for the White Bell Shrine, because it originally existed to seal the monster in the dry well, after the monster was killed by Su Xinxing, there was no reason for it to exist, so it did not matter if there was no god stationed there. Or rather, most of the shrines in Japan did not have gods stationed there. Asahi Sakura Kanji, as a witch who served Chihaya Fukuyama, should have come to Huaxia with them, but because the girl found Su Xinxing before leaving, and said with a serious face that she was going to participate in the holy war on the second day of CM or something, note, most of BL's doujinshi will be sold on the second day of the comic market, she hoped to come here in a few days. Because she did not seem to be joking, Su Xinxing could only agree to give her a holiday. That bastard from Enyang Shirtao dared to poison the food. Su Xinxing gritted his teeth. No poison, just some high-class seafood. And I have already told you, it was you who said, you can't eat it after returning to China, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and so on, so you ate a big meal, and that's why you are allergic, right? Chihaya Fukuyama sighed helplessly. Although the girl was a little sad to leave her hometown, Enyang Shirtao, because of Su Xinxing's threat, promised that no matter when she missed home, she could go back to play, and the ticket would be reimbursed by Enyang Shirtao. Anyway, I'm finally back. Su Xinxing smiled weakly. Let me go home and vomit to my heart's content. Hey, don't vomit at home. At least think about me, your new tenant. Chapter 148. After Su Xinxing came back, the daily life of Sakura Apartments returned to normal. However, Qin Xingyan had an extra job. She needed to teach Chihaya Fukuyama, the new tenant, Chinese. As for why it was her and not Su Xinxing or Mo Li, who had a better relationship with Chihaya, the reason was very simple. Whether it was Su Xinxing or Mo Li, they both had their own translation mechanisms, so there was no way for them to teach Chinese. It was worth mentioning that Qin Xingyan seemed to have experienced some strange adventures during this period of time, but because it had nothing to do with Su Xinxing, we didn't care about it for the time being. After a few days of this kind of life, Xiao Jingyi came to the door with the broken sword. "You're saying that there's a ghost that wants to take over this thing, but after you taught it a lesson, it became autistic and refuses to come out?" Su Xinxing shook the sword hilt in his hand and didn't feel like there was anything special about it. "That's right. By the way, you have a new tenant here." Xiao Jingyi looked at Chihaya Fukuyama, who was struggling to speak Chinese with Mo Li, and asked curiously. The girl was dressed casually, and her long black hair was tied into a ponytail. Coupled with the somewhat distressed expression on her face, she gave off the feeling of a delicate beauty. The new tenant was attracted by the excellent service and living environment of our Sakura apartments. He came all the way here to stay. Su Xinxing had a smug look on his face. Excellent service and living environment? Xiao Jingyi looked at Chihaya, who had just cleaned the room and was covered in dust. He then looked at the faintly visible cracks on the walls and the appliances that didn't look out of place even if they were antiques. He repeated in a rather skeptical tone. "Ahem, let's continue to talk about the ghost in this thing." Su Xinxing coughed dryly and dragged the topic back to the hilt in his hand. "So, why did you bring this thing to me?" "I heard from the director that the spirit chi in my house is too abundant. That's why demons were born. So I thought that if this thing continued to stay in my house, who knows when the thing inside would recover its strength and kill me. Alright, in any case, let's call out the thing inside and see what it is." Xiao Jingyi's intention was to put this thing in Su Xinxing's Sakura apartment, and let Su Xinxing personally look after it. However, Su Xinxing felt that it was not very safe. After all, the 4 residents of Sakura Suites were quite powerful. Even the weakest, Chihaya Fukuyama, had the power of a god's position to protect her. If they attacked her, they would be punished by the heavens. But don't forget that there was still Songyu, an ordinary person who often went in and out of Sakura's apartment. If Songyu was accidentally hurt by this thing one day, it would be awkward. "How do you plan to get the thing out?" Xiao Jingyi asked curiously. "Break it open." Su Xinxing answered uncertainly. Well, from Xiao Jingyi's expression, he didn't seem to think that this was a good idea. Therefore, Su Xinxing could only ask the expert in this field, Qin Xingyan, to help. Qin Xingyan also didn't insult the expert's name. After using a bunch of terms to make the 2 men confused, he used the chopstick-sized flying sword to lightly knock on the sword hilt. A pearl-colored translucent mist floated out of the broken sword and finally formed the appearance of a person. After realizing that it was being watched, the figure immediately put on a serious look. "I am the sword spirit of the Yuanrong sword. This time, I came to..." Without waiting for it to finish, the 3 people below started whispering to each other. "That. Big sister Qin Xingyan, what do you think?" Xiao Jingyi asked in a low voice. Although it is indeed a sword spirit, it still feels a bit strange. Qin Xingyan was thinking about something with a suspicious look on his face. "How about we beat it up first?" Su Xinxing suggested as usual. "Good idea. Remember to keep it alive." The result was unexpectedly unanimously agreed. 3 seconds later, the sword spirit was once again reminded of the horror of the outside world and the fear of being dominated by human violence. However, Qin Xingyan had already put a talisman on the broken sword, making it impossible for it to retract the broken sword. "What do you want?" It could only ask them while trembling. "Anyway, explain your situation first." Xiao Jingyi raised his hand and asked first. "Then we have to start from more than 2,000 years ago, please simplify it to less than 300 words." Xiao Jingyi immediately added, I don't want to help the author who updates so slowly. Dividing line. A long time ago, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan opened a furnace and forged 3 divine swords. Although they were not as good as the Xianyuan sword, these 3 swords were born with sword spirits because the Yellow Emperor used his divine blood to temper them. The Yuanrong sword and the Emperor's sword were a pair. As a single dog, the Prime Minister's sword silently left and was lost until it became Zhuge Kongming's sword. As divine swords, the Yuanrong sword and the Emperor's sword both had extraordinary power, but they reinforced and restrained each other's power. When the Emperor's sword's owner, Xiang Yu, was trapped by the Yuanrong sword's owner, Han Xian, he committed suicide in the Wu River. Xiang Yu's soaring resentment infected the Emperor's sword. To prevent the Emperor's sword from going out of control, the Yuanrong sword could only choose to die together with Xiang Yu. This was also the reason why Han Xian, who lost the protection of the Yuanrong sword, died in the clock room of Chang'e Palace. However, in these 2,000 years, the divine continent flowed with blood. Countless dynasties rose and fell. The resentment of the world accumulated and was absorbed by the Emperor's sword that was deeply sealed underground. In the end, the Emperor broke out of the seal and disappeared. The extremely weak Yuanrong sword could only stay quietly in the rock, waiting for a new owner to come and stop the Emperor's sword from going berserk. In the end, it was dug away along with the rock at dawn. Dividing line. After a moment of silence, Xiao Zhengyi said seriously. The word count is over 300. You're focusing on the wrong thing. And the silence just now was just a count. The Yuanrong sword's spirit was shocked. Okay, I'm not kidding. Xiao Zhengyi shrugged. According to what you said, shouldn't I be the so-called Yuanrong sword's owner? I don't think breaking and pulling out the sword are the same. Qin Xingyan also joined the discussion. Senior Su, aren't you going to say something? Su Xinxing touched his chin and then asked seriously, I'm hungry. Is dinner not ready yet? Realizing that the others were looking at him speechlessly, Su Xinxing laughed dryly and scratched his head. Actually, it's nothing much, right? The key is the Emperor's sword. When it causes trouble, we can just go over and kill it, right? Qin Xingyan and Xiao Zhengyi subconsciously wanted to refute, but thinking carefully, damn, what you said made sense. We were speechless. Chapter 149. From Chintua's name, which was full of rustic flavor, one could tell that he was an honest farmer's child. Because his grades were average and his family was not rich, Chintua dropped out of middle school and followed his father home to farm in order to let his younger brother continue his studies. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be like his father for the rest of his life. If he was lucky, he might be able to marry a wife and continue the family line. Of course, if that was the case, this story could not continue. Therefore, not long ago, Chintua encountered a small accident. He found an ancient sword in his family's field. Although he was inclined to hand the ancient sword over to the state, his parents, who were struggling to pay for his younger brother's school fees, had a different opinion. In their opinion, the state would only give them 500 yuan at most. It would be better to sell it secretly when a merchant came to the village to collect the goods. Chintua wanted to remind his parents that what they were doing was illegal, but when he saw the hopeful look in his parents' eyes, he could only sigh. That night, Chintua followed his parents' instructions and wiped the sword with a cloth dipped in vegetable oil. He was also worried that he would be exposed. As he wiped, the mud child's eyes could not help but be attracted to the beautiful sword. The broadsword-like body was made of some unknown metal, and it was a bright silver with a faint cyan hue. At first, it was not obvious because it was attached to the soil, but after all the soil was wiped away, the bright sword body and the exquisite and complex red patterns on the sword body complemented each other, making it look beautiful and enchanting. There was no trace of rust at all, which made Chintua wonder if he had made a mistake, and if this thing was not an antique at all. He had seen the so-called King of Yu's sword on TV before, but the sword in his hand was clearly much more beautiful than the King of Yu's sword. It was simply like a piece of art. Just as he came back to his senses and was about to continue wiping, a clear voice suddenly sounded from above his head. "Hey, little brat, are you the one who found me?" Chintuo was shocked and almost knocked over the bowl of vegetable oil. He looked up and saw a translucent woman floating in the air. This surreal scene scared him so much that even his scream was stuck in his throat. He could only retreat to the corner of the wall and stare in horror with his eyes wide open. He pointed his finger at the other party and made a loud noise in his throat. What kind of coward is this? Even the female ghost was shocked by his cowardly appearance. You actually spoke." "Nonsense, of course you can speak. It's better to say how slow you are," the female ghost roared. Yee dash. This made Chintua even more afraid. The plots of movies such as The Curse, Mall Street, and Midnight Bell that he had seen at his classmate's house suddenly appeared in his mind. Why did that guy always show him these horror movies? "AI, you should calm down. You can't even speak properly if you keep acting like a coward." Seeing Chintua like he was about to die of a heart attack, the female ghost sighed helplessly and tried to speak in an amiable tone. "Father, mother, your child is unfilial and is about to die, that's why I said calm down, you coward." Parting line. When Chintua really calmed down and was able to talk to the other party, the female ghost was already exhausted. Her body became more transparent as if she would disappear at any time. "So you're not the female ghost, but the immortal in this sword?" Chintua looked at the other party and said in disbelief. Until now, he finally had the time to look at the other party's appearance. The female ghost, immortal, was indeed dressed like she had run out of a period movie. Unfortunately, Chintua couldn't tell the difference between the different dynasties of the Celestial Dynasty, so he didn't know which era her clothes were from. In addition, the female ghost's hairstyle was a combination of a bun and two ponytails. Paired with her snow-white hair, it unexpectedly didn't look out of place with her clothes. "That's right, that's it. You can get my help, you should be happy. Isn't I the Emperor's title?" "Nonsense, in the era I was born, it was just a normal title, it has the same meaning as I." "Then can't you just call yourself I?" Chintua secretly muttered in his heart. Of course, he didn't have the courage to say it out loud. For this ordinary village child who was just scared to death, the female ghost and immortal were both existences that made him feel fear. "Then, great immortal, what do you want to do?" "Haha, don't worry. As my discoverer, I will bring you endless wealth and supreme power. What you need to do now is cut your finger and drip your blood on my sword." "That's right, it's the so-called dripping blood to recognize you as its master." Chintua was silent for a moment and then shook his head. "No, I've decided to hand this sword over to the country." "Why?" The female ghost obviously didn't expect him to say that. "Of course it's because it's scary." Chintua, who had never read a web novel before, was not familiar with this kind of plot, so he continued muttering in his heart. "No, nothing. Also, even if I don't do it, I can get someone else to do it, right?" Chintua, who was afraid that the female ghost would notice what he was thinking, immediately tried to cover it up. "Unfortunately, only you, the discoverer, can see me and hear my voice," the female ghost said with a regretful expression. The female ghost showed a regretful expression. "So, although I'm not happy, you're the only one who can help me. Anyway, if you're afraid of pain, you can get some human blood and sprinkle it on me." "As long as it's human blood?" "No, if I think about it from another perspective, does this female ghost need human blood?" Chintua subconsciously understood the hidden meaning in her words. This female ghost really isn't a good person. Which immortal wants to drink human blood? I'm still a bit scared, how about you cut my finger?" After noticing that the female ghost didn't seem to have done anything for a long time, Chintua immediately showed his usual honest expression and said to the female ghost. "Right now, I can't affect reality, so just get some blood." Without waiting for the ghost to finish, Chintua, who had obtained the information he wanted, immediately found a rag and wrapped it around the sword. Then, he used a straw rope to wrap it around the sword several times. After that, he ran to the yard, dug a hole with a shovel, and threw the sword into it to bury it. After doing all this, Chintua wiped off his sweat and looked refreshed. "Okay, take a bath and go to sleep." Chapter 150. Originally, Chintua was afraid that the female ghost, who had the ability to go through walls, could still come and bother him even if her body was buried. However, after a few days of fear, he found that the ghost was really gone. The only problem was how to explain it to his parents. Although telling the truth was also a solution, to be honest, he didn't think that anyone would believe him. So he simply lied, saying that he accidentally dropped the sword into the river when he was washing the mud off it. There was a big river not far from Chintua's house. That was the basis of his lie, and he wasn't afraid that anyone would want to fish for it. A chemical plant was built upstream of the river 7 or 8 years ago, making the river colorful. There was nothing but water hyacinth in the river. Even the crayfish that could survive in the cesspool had all died. Only people who took things too hard would go into the river. Regarding this, his parents had nothing to say except that they felt sorry. Originally, if things went on like this, his life would soon be back on track. As for the female ghost in the sword, at most, it would be a story that he would tell to his children and grandchildren when he was old. However, unexpected things happened. One day, when he was plowing the soil, a villager called him home. As soon as he got home, Tuwa felt that the atmosphere at home was not right. His mother kept wiping her tears. His brother, who usually lived at school, also came home with a frown on his face. So he put down the hoe and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" "Something happened to your father." The story was very simple. Chintua's father drove a battery tricycle to the street to buy something, but he was hit by a car halfway. That was not the point. The point was that the car owner ran away. There were no witnesses, no surveillance cameras, and no record of the license plate number, so Chintua's father's medical expenses could only be paid by his family. However, his father was the main labor of the family. After he fell down, the family lost its backbone. Moreover, it was said that his injury was serious and he needed surgery. The surgery fee was very expensive, and Tuwa's family did not have the money. His brother hesitated for a while, and finally pulled Tuwa to a corner and told him that he did not plan to continue studying. He wanted to drop out of school like Chintua and work to earn money. Chintua was anxious when he heard this. His smart and sensible brother had always been the hope of the Chin family. Tuwa dropped out of school so that his brother could continue to study with good grades. However, it was impossible to leave his father in the hospital. It was almost impossible to raise such a large sum of money in a short period of time. Wait a minute, it didn't seem impossible. Therefore, Chintua took advantage of the dead of night to dig out the sword that he had buried. "You damned mortal, you dare to do this to me." As soon as the sword unearthed, the female ghosts faced it to him. "Hee, aren't you still relying on me to help you get through this predicament? You." Gentutu of course ghost however, Chintua didn't seem to notice the other party's words at all. He just replaced the rags and straw rope on the sword with canvas and nylon rope. Then, he took the 2-hour bus ride to the city. Southern Chu was a relatively large city in this region. Naturally, there were some shops that couldn't be found in a small county town, for example, antique shops and the like. "Boss, how much can this be sold for?" How dare you sell me for money?" The female ghost made threatening gestures, but Chintua knew that she couldn't affect reality, so he ignored her. 500. The owner of the antique shop said without hesitation after studying it for a while. "What? It's only 500 yuan. It was unknown where the female ghost found out about the purchasing power of money in this era, but she became even more dissatisfied. She complained to the shopkeeper, but the shopkeeper could not see her at all. Isn't this too little? Chen Tuo was a little hesitant. It's an antique after all. It wasn't that he was well versed in antiques and felt that the price was unreasonable. It was purely because the price was too far from the price of Father Chen's surgery. Antique? Young man, it's fine if you use this thing to deceive ordinary people, but don't make a fool of yourself here. Do you know that the pattern is too shabby? Whose antique would be this new? The shopkeeper sneered. I'm willing to pay 500 yuan because this style is rather interesting. After he finished speaking, he seemed to be still not satisfied and continued to educate. I'm telling you, if you want to make a fake, don't pick this kind of thing to make. This thing looks similar to a bronze sword from the Warring States period. If you really make this kind of fake to the extent that it looks like the real thing, no shop will dare to accept it. It's a national treasure on the same level as the King of Yu's Gojian sword. After hesitating for a long time, Chen Tuo still didn't sell it in the end. In any case, it's only 500 yuan. I might as well hand it over to the country. I say, you're a female ghost, but you're actually staying in such a worthless thing. After running to several antique shops and receiving similar replies, Chen Tuo finally gave up. What do you mean worthless? I'm telling you, this sword is the real thing. Have you heard of the Emperor's sword? The female ghost jumped up and down to complain about the sword she was lodging in. Have you heard of Xiang Yu? Have you heard of Han Xan? I'm talking and laughing with them. It's those idiots who don't know what's good for them. I remember that those two guys seem to have died quite miserably. Chapter 151. Ding Yang was a treasure hunter. He had made a name for himself by fighting. When he was in an ancient tomb, he accidentally swallowed an elixir that was still in its shelf life. Because of this, he, who was originally just a mortal, had 1 foot in the door of immortality. After accumulating a lot of wealth, he changed his identity and became the boss of a shell company with a net worth of tens of millions. At the same time, because he had been brainwashed by all the immortal cultivation novels on the internet, Ding Yang realized that he had stepped into a realm that ordinary people had never even heard of in their lives through a fortuitous encounter. He realized something: I'm definitely the F***King main character. Unfortunately, in this era, there was a lack of spiritual qi. It was almost impossible to reach the threshold of immortality through self-exploration. Therefore, Ding Yang simply transformed his shell company into a garbage dump. He went to the countryside to collect all kinds of ancient garbage. He often went to the antique street and became a fat sheep in the eyes of all the antique shop owners. He wanted to find a few magic treasures that had been passed down from ancient times. He didn't expect that he would really find some strange magic treasures. Although he didn't find anything good, such as the ring with the old grandpa in it, or the mysterious bottle that could accelerate the ripening of all kinds of strange flowers and herbs, he was even more convinced that, I am the main character. Today, he had come out on a whim to wander around, but he didn't expect to see something that interested him. Now, he was following a teenager who was dressed like a country bumpkin. Don't get me wrong. He did not have the kind of hobby that would make men's chrysanthemums cold. He was just curious. Within a day, the young man had visited almost all the lottery shops in the vicinity. As long as the shop sold scratch-off tickets, he would take out money to buy one. After scratching off the scratch-off tickets, he would leave. That's right, every ticket had a prize, and the prize was around 1,000 to 5,000. After half a day, he had almost earned 100,000 yuan. Although it was not comparable to Ding Yang's, it made Ding Yang realize that the teenager probably had some kind of treasure. Of course, Ding Yang did not want to kill him and rob him. Even if he had been brainwashed by immortal cultivation novels, he was very clear that this was a society governed by law. It had not yet reached the point where he could kill anyone who stood in his way. If he casually killed someone, he would have to go to prison to pick up soap or eat peanuts. Besides, Ding Yang himself was not a bad guy, of course, he was not a good guy either. Otherwise, he would not have needed to transform his company into a garbage dump at all. He could have used more radical methods to collect what he suspected to be magical equipment. Right now, he just wanted to see the other party's treasure. He saw the young man once again exchange a colored dot for a 5,000 yuan bonus and put it into the bag he just bought not long ago. After carefully leaving the place, he was about to follow him, but he found that 3 burly men were one step ahead of him and did the same thing. Dividing line, how is it? This emperor is still quite useful, right? The female ghost in the sword proudly floated around Chintua. After searching for half a day, she realized that among the few abilities she had left, she still had X-ray vision. Therefore, he took Chintua to buy scratch-off tickets. Although the young man was a little hesitant about this, in the end, when he thought about his father who was still lying in bed and his brother who was waiting for school fees, he could only use this shady method to make money. In theory, after he had enough capital, he could use the female ghost's ability to make a lot of money by gambling on stones, picking up scraps, and so on. However, if he did that, this novel would become a business novel, so Tu Hua did not plan to do that. It's okay. Because he always felt that if he praised the female ghost would get carried away, so Chintua just replied without any expression. About the matter of the blood recognizing its master, no, I've been anemic recently. It's fine if you don't use your blood. This emperor is not picky. No, I've been dizzy with blood recently. You clearly had duck blood and vermicelli soup for lunch, is that the same thing? The two bickered as they walked into a small alley. At this time, the female ghost in the sword glanced behind Chintua and said leisurely, "There are a few guys with bad intentions sneaking up on you." Chintua was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted. As the saying goes, don't show your wealth, it should be because when he won the money, he was targeted by the hooligans. After all, a child with a few bundles of money in his hand was quite tempting to the outlaws. Originally, in order to hide the large amount of prize money and the ancient sword, he specially spent money to buy a big backpack, but he did not expect to be targeted. Do you need my help? As long as you drip your blood to recognize me as your master, no matter how many mortals there are, they won't be a match for this emperor. Seeing Chintua in a difficult situation, the female ghost in the sword not only did not panic, but also kindly persuaded Chintua. Look at my shoes. Chintua said unhurriedly. What? The female ghost in the sword was stunned. She followed Chintua's gaze and looked down, only to find that he was only wearing a pair of old sports shoes. I used to wear cloth shoes to participate in the city's middle school's long-distance running competition and won first place. This pair of shoes was my reward at that time. Finished speaking, the youth took to his heels and ran away like an arrow leaving a bow, leaving behind the dumbfounded female ghost and the outlaws. Ah, that kid ran away. Fuck, he ran so fast. Big brother, we can't catch up. Take a shortcut, quickly take a shortcut. The hooligans who were stealthily approaching from behind suddenly panicked voices. Clearly, the fact that a roasted duck suddenly sprouted wings and flew away caught them somewhat unprepared. However, although Chintua ran very fast, he did not come to southern Chu City often and was not familiar with the terrain. On the other hand, those 3 hoodlums were locals and were very familiar with all kinds of shortcuts. Not long after, Chintua was blocked by them in a small alley. Huff huff. You damn brat. Huff huff. Run for me again. Huff huff, fuck. Huff huff. You run like. Huff huff. Rabbit huff huff, I. Huff huff huff. I must break. Ha! Your legs. The 3's panting appearance greatly reduced their deterrent force, but the complacency in their eyes was as clear as day. In the end, before they could make a move, Chintua, who did not even pant, swung his backpack and knocked one of them down. The backpack, which contained nearly 100,000 yuan in cash and the ancient sword, was quite heavy. Although it was not as strong as a meteor hammer, it won in the element of surprise. It was about the same as the legendary stool that was ranked first on the weapons list. They actually dared to make a move. Looks like I have to show some real skills. The guy who seemed to be the boss took out a butterfly knife and made a series of dazzling movements. Then, probably wanting to show off his fierceness, he stuck out his tongue and licked the blade. The other guy, who seemed to be the younger brother, cheered and flattered from the side. Just as Chintua was considering whether or not to take advantage of this opportunity to leave, the two hoodlums suddenly rolled their eyes and inexplicably fell to the ground. Then, from the corner of the alley, a man about 27 or 28 years old walked out. Don't worry, they just fell asleep. It's not a big deal. He made a drinking gesture towards Chintua. Little brother, do you want to go to the milk tea shop over there to drink something? My treat. Chapter 152. To have a certain degree of vigilance towards strangers was a basic principle of life. Therefore, in theory, Chintua should not accept the other party's invitation. But the youth was keenly aware that the other party was not so easy to deal with. Not to mention other things, just the ability to make people fall asleep in an instant was very terrifying. At least, Chintua felt that he had no way to deal with it. After thinking about it, the farmer's child suddenly realized that even if he saw such an unscientific thing, he did not feel any sense of panic. It seemed that the female ghost in the sword had a great impact on him, and his worldview was completely shattered. Wah! The female ghost floated in front of the youth and waved her fist at the other party's eyes in a threatening manner. But the other party did not react at all, unless he had undergone special training. Otherwise, when something approached his face at an extremely fast speed, people would subconsciously close their eyes. But the youth did not even have this kind of reaction. It seemed that like ordinary people, this youth was unable to see the female ghost. What, I thought that I met a cultivator with some skills, but it turns out that he's just a dabbler. The female ghost curled her lips disappointedly. What's wrong? Seeing Chintua in deep thought, the youth curiously asked. No, it's nothing. Chintua came back to his senses and shook his head. Then, he revealed his signature honest expression. Uncle, why do you want to treat me to a drink? When the female ghost saw that Chintua revealed that extremely deceptive expression, she made an exaggerated vomiting action. But naturally, Chintua ignored her. If I have to say, I should be interested in something in your bag. After saying that, the youth walked toward the milk tea shop, as if he did not consider that Chintua would refuse. Chintua hesitated for a moment before blindly following the youth. When passing by the two delinquents who were still sleeping, the female ghost whispered in his ear. It's a sleepy bug. That guy can actually tame this kind of thing. Sleepy bug? That kind of mythical thing actually exists. Chintua was a little surprised. As if sensing his surprise, the female ghost used her translucent hands to cover his eyes. Through the female ghost's hands, Chintua also saw something similar to a stick insect in the ears of the two hooligans. At this time, half of the creature's body had reached into the ears of the two hooligans, giving him a bad feeling. Earthchild followed the man into the milk tea shop, ordered 2 cups of milk tea, and sat down in a secluded corner. Only then did the young man formally introduce himself. My name is Ding Yang. I can be considered half an immortal cultivator. He knocked on the table with his right index finger, and the straw on the table jumped up as if it had a life of its own. It inserted itself into the lid of the milk tea, and it felt quite magical. However, the force of the straw was a little too strong, and the milk tea in the soft plastic cup splashed everywhere. However, Ding Yang seemed to be very satisfied with his skill, and he looked at Chintua with a smile. Little brother, where did you learn from? If it weren't for the female ghost who criticized Ding Yang's skill, Chintua would probably be frightened by his skill as well. I'm just an ordinary person. Chintua scratched his head and continued to smile honestly, looking very sincere. I'm not as good as you, brother Ding. Ordinary people can't buy lottery tickets and win them one by one. Ding Yang laughed and exposed Earthchild's lie without hesitation. This made Chintua's heart tighten, and he instinctively hugged his backpack, thinking that the other party was also here for the money. This was the difference between a person's vision and a person's. Although Chintua wasn't stupid, before he met the female ghost, he was just an ordinary farmer's child. Let alone 100,000 yuan, even 1,000 yuan was a huge sum for him. Therefore, he couldn't understand the mentality of someone like Ding Yang who didn't lack money, and subconsciously thought that the other party was here for the huge sum of 100,000 yuan. Ha, don't misunderstand, I'm not interested in your money. Seeing Chintua's reaction, Ding Yang couldn't help but be amused. However, his words had the opposite effect, and Chintua was so scared that he desperately shrank back, trying to put some distance between him and Ding Yang. *CK, I'm not interested in your money either. Ding Yang was embarrassed, and he coughed dryly. After his expression returned to normal, he slowly said, "Little brother, you must have some kind of magic treasure on you, right? Can you let me have a look?" Magic treasure? The only thing that Earth Kid could think of was the ancient sword that the female ghost had taken over. Just as he was hesitating whether to take it out or not, the female ghost, who had been criticizing Ding Yang from his hairstyle to his socks, suddenly turned pale, although her face was originally white, and she suddenly hid under the table. What's wrong? Chintua, who had never seen the female ghost like this, couldn't help but be curious. At this moment, there were new customers walking into the milk tea shop, and Chintua and Ding Yang's attention were attracted to them. The newcomers were a strange trio, two young men of similar age, and a short lowly. Although the little girl was wearing a cap, from her exposed sideburns, her hair was a rare blonde. Then, Chintua noticed that one of the young men was carrying a long canvas bag on his back, but he didn't know what was inside. What he was more concerned about was that after the three of them ordered drinks and found a place to sit down, there was an extra person. The extra person was similar to the female ghost, and the color of his whole body was also light, like a pearl. His whole body was translucent, and he looked very strange. The other party didn't seem to have any intention of avoiding him, and if he listened carefully, Earth Kid could clearly hear their conversation. "I say, that guy was bragging about how powerful the Emperor's sword was, but nothing happened these days." One of the young men complained to the young man with the backpack, "I still have to go back to Jiangjin University to study. If I don't have enough credits, you have to pay for my tuition. Because the Yuanrong sword hasn't recovered yet, we can only determine a rough location, but it should be in this city." The other young man could only smile apologetically. "How are we going to find it in such a big city?" The young man with the hedgehog hair was still very dissatisfied, and he leaned on the table and muttered, "It's not like we're acting in a movie, how can we find it so easily?" The cute blonde girl was eating the tea that she had ordered at some point, and she didn't seem to be interested in the argument of the two people in front of her. Emperor's sword? Earth Kid blinked his eyes. It seemed that the female ghost's sword was called that. Chapter 153. Of course, Chintua would not sell the ancient sword to those people. First of all, doing that would not only not solve the problem, but it would also give people a feeling that he had ulterior motives, which would make it easier for him to get into trouble and get involved in troublesome situations. Second of all, the female ghost could be considered to have helped him solve an urgent problem. Out of the simple and honest outlook of the Earth Child, he would feel guilty if he sold her off just like that. Moreover, judging from the way the female ghost was so afraid of the people at the table, even if they got the Emperor's sword, they would not treat her well. It was more likely that they would just release the female ghost. Just as he was thinking about this, the people on the other side had finished their milk tea and left the milk tea shop. However, Chintua did not know if it was an illusion, but when they were leaving, he felt that the blonde girl seemed to have sensed something and looked in their direction. This gave him a fright. Fortunately, she did not say anything and just left with the two young men. Parting line, Ding Yang lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Through the curling smoke, he looked at Chintua, who seemed to be in a daze. Ding Yang had started from scratch and made such a big name at such a young age. Of course, he did not rely on luck. He had some experience in judging people. From the very beginning, he knew that the little guy in front of him had a certain degree of wariness towards him. Even after he was honest with him, the other party did not let down his guard. The biggest evidence was that this little guy was still pretending to be honest and naive. And now he was in a daze. Actually, he was thinking about the Emperor's sword. It seemed that he was determined not to talk to him anymore. Since the possibility of seeing the treasure or even buying it through legal negotiations was very low, he could only choose other ways to cooperate. As for why he did not use more extreme methods, such as threatening or directly using force to get the treasure from Chintua, with his current connections and power, although there would be some repercussions, they were all within the scope of his ability to solve. The reason was very simple. Because in cultivation novels, only the villains would do such things. Ding Yang, who thought that he was the main character, would never do such a tasteless thing. Besides, what if he was threatened and said, "Don't bully a poor young man. Kill him to silence him." "Alright, since you don't want me to see your treasure, that's fine too." He spread out his hands, indicating that although he was very regretful, he didn't think too much about it. "But based on your previous actions, that treasure should have the ability to see through things, right?" Chintua glanced at the female ghost who had regained her arrogance after those people left. After a moment of silence, he nodded. "Do you know that Southern Chu City is building a subway recently?" Ding Yang was very happy that the youth had finally reacted, so he continued to ask. This matter wasn't news. Even though Chintua didn't often come to Southern Chu, he had heard about it from many people's idle chatter during his day of running around. However, this didn't seem to have anything to do with him, so he didn't say anything. He just remained silent, waiting for Ding Yang to get to the point. This made Ding Yang, who had originally planned to keep the youth in suspense, feel very bored. He could only resentfully continue to say, "The construction company who contracted for the project has some connections with me." But when they were working, they dug up something not very good in the area that was originally supposed to be a subway station. It was a small but somewhat strange ancient tomb. Originally, they only planned to get rid of that thing themselves, but because many accidents occurred, the construction period was delayed. If they wanted to get around it, they would have to burn a considerable amount of their budget. Moreover, the entire project would have to be replanned. So they found some experienced people to get rid of that thing from the area that was supposed to be a subway station. As he spoke, Ding Yang sighed and used his thumb to poke his chest. "I am one of those experienced people." Even though he had cleared his name, he had made quite a name for himself in the past. If someone wanted to inquire about him, they could still find him by following the vine to the melon. As someone who had almost stepped onto the path of cultivation, Ding Yang naturally knew how harmful it would be to casually destroy some ancient tombs. This was also the main reason why he had retired from the excavating world. Moreover, this was a tomb that even ordinary people would find somewhat strange. In the past, he didn't understand these things. But now, even if he did, he had to bite the bullet because of his debt of gratitude and various other problems. And at this time, he had met Chintua, who had the ability to see through things, which naturally made him overjoyed. The greatest difficulty in exploring this world was not knowing anything. As long as he was prepared, Ding Yang felt that he should be able to decipher an ancient tomb. "Sorry." After hearing Ding Yang's words, Chintua immediately wanted to refuse. Digging up other people's tombs would be criticized in the countryside. Moreover, from the bitter expression on Ding Yang's face, it was clear that this matter was not as simple as he made it out to be. "Don't be in a hurry to refuse." Ding Yang reached out to stop Chintua, who was about to stand up and leave. "Your father was hospitalized because of a car accident, right?" Chintua frowned. "Don't misunderstand. I didn't mean to use your father to threaten you." Ding Yang chuckled and sat back down in his seat. The reason you use this method to make money is to raise money for your father's surgery, right? How do you know? The honest expression on Chintua's face disappeared and was replaced by blatant vigilance. Don't underestimate the power of money. If you want to investigate a person who didn't deliberately hide his identity, half a day is enough. Ding Yang put out the remaining half of his cigarette in the ashtray. Your father's spine and legs were seriously injured. If this continues, he will have to amputate his legs. I believe the hospital has already informed you. But in fact, if you have an expert in this field, it's still possible to save his legs. How much does it cost? Chen Tua's eyes lit up. It's not a matter of money. There are still some problems in this world that money can't solve, such as connections, Ding Yang said proudly. I happen to know an expert in this field. You were the one who said not to underestimate money, Chen Tua muttered in his heart. Don't worry, there's still time. I don't plan to rush you. Here's my business card. Ding Yang took out a business card from his front pocket and stuffed it into Chen Tua's hand. Then he stood up. As long as you think it through in a week, give me a call. I'll pay for the surgery. That's it. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and turned around to leave. After he left for a while, Chen Tua suddenly came to his senses. Wait, that guy didn't pay the bill. He said he would treat us. Chapter 154. With so many things happening, Chen Tua didn't have the leisure to continue using the lottery to make money. In order to not make his mother worry, he didn't stay any longer and directly got on the bus back home, planning to return home before it got dark. Unlike the bus to Southern Chu, the bus back home was completely empty. Chen Tua subconsciously sat in the last row and hugged the backpack. He didn't care about the female ghost who was making faces at him. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, he asked the female ghost who was looking out of the window out of boredom. Speaking of which, I still don't know your name. The female ghost opened her eyes wide and had an expression of, this guy actually took the initiative to talk to me, what's wrong with this world? It seemed like Chen Tua's previous actions had left a psychological shadow in this guy's heart. It's fine if you don't want to say it. However, Chen Tua interpreted the female ghost's silence as another meaning, so he continued to bury his face behind the backpack and stare blankly. No, wait, this emperor's brain just hasn't processed it yet, how about you ask again? Chen Tua's gaze coldly watched the insatiable female ghost. Son of Heaven, just call me Son of Heaven. Thus, the female ghost immediately gave in. You call yourself this emperor and your name is Son of Heaven. You're really stubborn about this setting. It's not a setting. It's always been like this. The female ghost wanted to cry but had no tears. This emperor is the sword spirit of the Son of Heaven's sword, that's why I'm called Son of Heaven. As for this emperor's name, it was very normal in that era. This emperor even knew a guy who always said something like, this emperor is the imperial examination. Chen Tua hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he decided not to care about this guy's relationship with Chu Yuan. But why did you suddenly ask for this emperor's name? Could it be that you saw this emperor's great power, so you became enlightened and want to drip blood to recognize me as your master? Because you're embarrassed, you're trying to worm your way into being friends with me? What a cute guy. Wait, this emperor was wrong, please don't throw the Son of Heaven's sword out the window. The originally arrogant Son of Heaven immediately became terrified. To be honest, Chen Tua was having a hard time dealing with this fellow who did not learn his lesson. If it were someone with ambition, such as Ding Yang, if they obtained the Emperor's sword, they would definitely make good use of this power to fight for greater benefits for themselves. If it was someone who was afraid of trouble, throwing away the sword early was also a choice. In terms of personality, Chen Tua was closer to the latter. However, his principles made it impossible for him to burn the bridge after crossing the river and abandon her after using the power of the Emperor to earn money. Seriously, what would happen if you could absorb human blood? Chen Tuo tried his best to make himself look more serious. Otherwise, as a sword spirit, Tianzi would most likely fool around with this question. When the time comes, even if you raise the Son of Heaven's sword and shout, "I'm invincible in the world," no boots will fall from the sky and stab you to death. Tianzi crossed his arms and answered with uncertainty. What's the point of sucking blood if you don't even know the use of it? Chen Tuo felt that he was an idiot for being so serious just now. What can I do? I only remember that I seemed to have been trapped by something at the beginning. In order to escape, I used all my strength. In the end, I even lost my memories of the past. I only remember some unimportant things. It turned out that Chu Yuan belonged to the type of people who didn't matter, and don't look at me like this now. When I was at my peak, I was a mature beauty with a nice body. How should he put it? Looking at a little girl full of ancient martial arts style speaking English, it always made him feel like he was acting out of a play. What's the meaning of that suspicious look? I'm not lying to you. I used to be called Beauty You. Wait a minute, let me straighten it out first. Chen Tuo dug his ears. After confirming that he did not hear wrongly, his face was full of shock. He felt that he had learned history for nothing. You're Beauty You. Didn't I say before that I talked and laughed with that kid Xiang Yu before? The female ghost who called herself Tianzi answered matter-of-factly. Talking and laughing with Overlord Yu Ji were completely different, right? Wait a minute, since she still remembered this matter, could it be that Xiang Yu, the Overlord of Chu, also belonged to the unimportant category in this girl's memory? Not good. Now when I read the story of Overlord Yu Ji in the future, my tears will come from another side. Then when you were in the milk tea shop, why did you hide when you saw those foreigners? Then, Earthchild asked again. Because I noticed that they had the kind of aura that once trapped me. It was very, very annoying. At this point, the expression on Tianzi's face changed rapidly several times like a changing color neon light. Finally, she sighed, but I don't know why, but it was a nostalgic aura. Earthchild realized that this did not seem to be a pleasant experience for Tianzi to talk about. So he immediately asked another question, since you don't even know what will happen after sucking blood, why do you crave blood so much? The ancient people didn't know that rice would eventually turn into glucose to replenish energy. Didn't they still want to eat? Tianzi replied without hesitation. Chen Tuo, who dropped out of school and didn't study biology, was speechless. So where did this guy who said he was a living fossil learn this kind of knowledge from? But it's incredible that you would talk so much to me. Seeing that Earthchild didn't seem to have anything else to ask, Tianzi said with a smile. Obviously, this was very fresh to him. Chen Tuo looked at the sky outside and found that it was almost dusk. But the scenery outside the window gradually became familiar. It seemed that they would soon arrive at Chen Tuo's hometown. Tianzi, I've decided to accept that guy's invitation. Just as the bus was about to arrive at the station, Chen Tuo suddenly said. Oh. The sword spirit of Tianzi's sword looked incredulous. I'll have to trouble you then. Earthchild's voice sounded almost at the same time as the bus arrived at the station. When all this is done, I'll give you a drop of blood. Is it the blood of livestock such as chickens, ducks, pigs, and dogs, and then you'll laugh and say, hee hee, I didn't say human blood. What kind of image do you have of me in your mind? Chen Tuo sighed. You don't play by the rules. You're obviously very insidious, but you pretend to be honest and deceive people. Sure enough, forget about the blood dripping. This guy will be my free labor until he dies. Chapter 155. The next day, after making all the necessary preparations, Chen Tuo brought the Emperor's sword to the place he had agreed to meet with Ding Yang on the phone last night. It was a bar in a relatively remote area. When Chen Tuo arrived, he discovered that not far from the bar, there was a blue partition board with the words, "Under construction," written on it. It had completely cut off the original two-lane road, making the already deserted street even more deserted. When Chintua arrived, it was around 8 in the morning. It was rush hour in downtown southern Chu, and all the roads were jammed. Only this bar was devoid of people. When he entered the bar, Ding Yang was already inside. Seeing Chintua's arrival, a relieved smile appeared on his square face. It's so early. You haven't eaten breakfast yet, right? Do you want to order something? It's my treat. Ding Yang pointed at the bartender who was lazily wiping glasses at the bar. It would have been better if he hadn't invited a guest. Now that he did, Chintua remembered how he had been fooled by this guy yesterday, and he suddenly felt a little annoyed. No need. I've already eaten soaked rice. He straightened his neck and stiffly refused. If you want to do something, then hurry up. I still have to rush to the hospital to visit my dad today. Originally, this job wouldn't start until a week later. But it just so happens that I don't trust those experts, so I talked to my friend yesterday. Today, it's just the two of us. Seeing Chintua so straightforward, Ding Yang also had a heroic look on his face. Let's go. Wait a minute. Aren't you going to bring anything? Chintua looked at Ding Yang's empty hands and suddenly frowned. What do you think I'm going to bring? Loot talismans, black donkey hooves, something like that. The Earth Kid said uncertainly. Although Chintua didn't have any experience or knowledge of tomb raiding, he had heard of some of the things mentioned in the novels under the influence of his classmate who was especially fond of horror movies and novels. For example, things like looting gold, ghost blows out the light, chicken crows don't loot gold, and so on. I'm not a tomb raider, where would I get the tomb raider talisman? You've watched too many movies about black donkey hooves. Even a bowl of black dog's blood is more useful than that. Ding Yang sneered and patted his chest confidently. I've brought all the things that are really useful with me. Multifunctional changeable paratrooper's knife, high-strength polymerized nylon rope, portable titanium alloy hook claw, special fluorescent spray, strong cluster flashlight produced in Germany, exorcism talisman consecrated by the 8th abbot of Baolin Temple, and I even have a military shovel and candles in my car outside. Chintua was dumbfounded. For a country bumpkin like him who had spent the first half of his life in the countryside, these things with long names always sounded awesome even though he didn't understand them. That talisman is a lie, it's definitely a lie. I can't feel any power from it at all. Tianzi was still trying to stir up trouble, but Chintua couldn't punish her in front of other people. After all, other than him, no one else could see Tianzi. All in all, after understanding that Ding Yang had come prepared, Chintua discussed some rules of conduct with him. Then, he followed him to the car to get some other necessities. Together, they climbed over the fence and walked toward the legendary tomb through the tunnel dug out from the construction site. At present, only a prototype of the tunnel had been dug out. Although the supports and other things had been built, there were no stairs. In the darkness, it was very uncomfortable to walk. There were originally lights here, and the power was connected from the outside. However, after a series of accidents, even the lights inside the tunnel were broken. Until now, no one knew how the light bulbs broke. The construction workers have been scared out of their wits by the continuous accidents. Although they can transfer people from other construction sites to work here, as long as the accidents don't stop, the construction here won't make much progress. Ding Yang, who was walking in front, didn't forget to explain, a little further ahead is where the tomb is. After the workers brought me here last time, they refused to go any further. It's said that the workers who crossed this area were all injured to a certain extent. Now, they are all lying in the hospital. The construction company has to pay no less than 500,000 yuan for the medical expenses alone. As they spoke, they saw the so-called tomb not far in front of them. From Tu Wazi's point of view, rather than a tomb, it was more like a courtyard wall and gate of a rich family that was commonly seen in wuxia dramas. The only difference was that the stone lion placed at the entrance of the tomb was not a guardian stone lion, but a creature that Tu Wazi couldn't recognize. It was probably something from a myth. There's even a big red lantern. What was this family thinking when they were buried? Tu Wazi muttered curiously. But then he realized that Ding Yang's footsteps had unknowingly stopped. With the help of the flashlight, he could see that Ding Yang's square face was now full of fear and distortion. His body was even faintly trembling. What's wrong? No. No. It wasn't like this the last time I was here. Ding Yang held his head, his eyes full of fear. It was clearly just an ordinary tomb before, and the entrance was just a very ordinary hole that was dug out. As a person who was half a step away from entering the door of the cultivation world, when faced with all this, he didn't notice anything strange at all. This was undoubtedly a big blow to him. Indeed, there's something strange about this place. Even Tianzi was no longer joking at this moment. Instead, he stared at the 2 vermilion gates seriously and said, if your cultivation is not enough, it's better not to have anything to do with this kind of thing. When he said this, even Tu Wazi felt a little creeped out. And as the excitement from before passed, he, who had calmed down, also discovered some strange things. If it was buried underground all year round, why was the vermilion gate as new and shiny as the floor that had just been waxed? The lantern also looked like it had just been mounted, and it didn't have the dry feeling that it had after years of being air-dried. In short, he swallowed and tried to calm himself down. Let's go out and think about it first. Ding Yang naturally wouldn't object. Just as they were about to leave, the big red lantern in front of the door suddenly lit up. Then, accompanied by a long and ear-piercing creak, the 2 vermilion red doors that were more than 3 meters tall inexplicably opened by themselves. However, there was nothing behind the door at all. Even if a strong flashlight shone inside, there was only thick darkness. The ominous premonition became even stronger, which made Tu Wazi turn around and run without any hesitation. But it was all too late. The darkness that flowed out from the door soaked the entire space. Even if he turned around, he couldn't find the original path. No matter how he ran, it was like running in the same place. The distance between him and the strange gate was not even a little bit. All of this was simply, just like a nightmare. Chen Tuo sighed deeply and gave up on the futile effort. There was no doubt that there were only 2 choices now. One was to wait outside the door and see what happened, or to wait for death. 2 was to enter the door and find a way to escape, or to seek death. Clenching the straps of his backpack, he took a deep breath and decided to seek death. Wait, I'll go with you. Ding Yang finally pulled himself together at this time. He hurriedly stood up and followed behind Chen Tuo, entering the strange gate with him. Chapter 156. After passing through the door, a small, antique house that looked like a courtyard house appeared in the originally empty darkness. In the center of the courtyard, there were several stone lampposts as thick as bowls, emitting a faint orange light. Curious, Chen Tuo carefully looked through the hole at the top of the lamppost, which looked like a small pavilion. He found that there was not lamp oil inside, but craftsmanship candles. The candles were made to look like half man, half fish. They raised their hands, their faces full of pain, and flames came out of their palms. There was clearly no wind in this underground courtyard, but the candlelight kept swaying, just like a soul that was struggling on its deathbed. I know, this is the haunted house. Ding Yang suddenly exclaimed. Haunted what? Tu Wazi was confused. Haunted house. I've only heard of it before. It's said that some rich people or feng shui masters, in order to ensure the prosperity of their family, will spend a lot of money and resources to build a haunted house with feng shui before they die. However, once that kind of thing is built on a dead land, not only will it end their family line, but the haunted house itself will also gather a large amount of resentment, forming a feng shui killing trap. It's called the haunted house. TSK, I didn't expect this rumor to be true. Ding Yang explained with an unsightly expression. Spending so much money to end their family line, is this person crazy? Tu Wazi couldn't help but mutter. But in this terrifyingly silent environment, muttering was no different from ordinary talking. You can't say that. After all, feng shui is a mystery built on the terrain. If the terrain changes, the feng shui will naturally change as well. Ding Yang shook his head and continued to explain to Tu Wazi, as far as I know, it's recorded in the local annals that during the southern Chu dynasty, a lake was filled to create farmland here, which greatly changed the feng shui of the city. The style of this house is closer to that of the Ming dynasty, obviously before the lake was filled to create farmland. Maybe it was because of this that the original feng shui treasured land became a haunted house. Then is there any way to break this? Tu Wazi hurriedly asked. The main body of the haunted house isn't that big. If I had known earlier, I would have used a strong explosive to blow it up before the ghost chi leaked out. Ding Yang said with a bitter smile, although it will be troublesome for the ghost chi to spread to the surface after that, it will disappear sooner or later as the sun shines. It's much better than the current situation. Explosives, yes, this was very scientific. What about now? While you still have time to catch your breath, let's remember the good times of life. Just as Tu Wazi was considering whether or not he should choose a room to try his luck, the originally dark room suddenly began to flash with a terrifying light. What was even more frightening was that in the flashes of light, one could occasionally see the reflection of a slender figure on the ground. However, the room still felt empty, and there was no shadow at all on the paper window. Gradually, every room began to emit the sound of wooden boards colliding with each other, and it became more and more urgent. This place is very bad. If you don't leave quickly, you and that idiot will be eaten alive. Tianzi, who had been a little absent-minded from the beginning, had a solemn expression as she looked around. Chen Tuo noticed that she seemed to be different from Ding Yang and himself. Her gaze was not blank and unfocused, but as if she was looking at something. It was very likely that something could also sense Tianzi's existence, so until now, it had not caused any substantial damage to them. However, Chen Tuo knew very well that although Tianzi was a supernatural creature, she was also a veritable qi. Even a mortal like him could not do anything to her, let alone a monster in this dangerous place. Therefore, after a few seconds of mental struggle, Chen Tuo took out the Emperor's sword from the backpack on his back. Then, under Ding Yang's gaze, he used the blade to cut his palm. Tianzi, can you solve this situation now? Chen Tuo, who felt the blood and physical strength in his body rapidly flowing out, asked in a low voice. However, Tianzi just floated in the air with a dull expression on her face. After a while, she looked at her hands in disbelief and muttered softly, I remember now. As soon as she finished speaking, the Emperor's sword in Chen Tuo's hand jumped out of his hand and stabbed into the center of the courtyard. Almost at the same time, the restless doors and windows suddenly quieted down. Even the candlelight in the few lampposts that were originally not very stable were no longer jumping. Instead, they were spreading light like real candles. Does this count as solved? Chen Tuo asked in disbelief. It felt like Tianzi did not do anything. No, it's not solved. Tianzi sighed. Her tone was completely different from the light and slightly funny feeling from before. It gave people a much calmer feeling. Instead, they're all in hiding. What's wrong? What the hell is going on? Ding Yang, who was still unaware of the situation because he could not see Tianzi, hurriedly asked. Hiding? Chen Tuo asked in confusion, why would they hide? Didn't this idiot just explain? The haunted mansion is an existence that gathers a large amount of resentment. Once this kind of thing faces an existence with a stronger resentment, it will naturally hide out of instinct. Tianzi's expression was somewhat sad. And my main body, the Emperor's sword, happens to be that kind of existence. That's great. If you're here, we can get out, right? Chen Tuo did not notice the sad expression on Ding Yang's face because of the sudden good news. Instead, he was eager to try. That's right. Hurry up and leave. Tianzi waved her hand lightly. The thick ink-like darkness outside the door immediately faded away, indicating that the white light of the exit appeared there. Although I don't know what happened, the exit seems to have appeared. Let's run now. Ding Yang was overjoyed. He quickly rushed out of the door and ran towards the exit. Chen Tuo subconsciously wanted to pull out the sword, but was stopped by Tianzi. The Emperor's sword is a sword of resentment. After dripping blood to activate the resentment in the sword, it is no longer something that normal people can touch. Otherwise, they might be swallowed up by the resentment that spans thousands of years and become a demon. You don't have to worry about me. Let the Emperor's sword and the haunted mansion be buried underground again. Hurry up and leave. Then I'll have to trouble you. Chen Tuo gave Tianzi a thumbs up. Well, even though I said it myself, I will still feel sad that you abandoned me so easily. Tianzi's expression was subtle as she muttered. As expected, you actually don't want to be left alone in this damned place, right? The Earth Child who was about to leave stopped and turned back to look at Son of Heaven. No, I just... The female ghost who had lived for thousands of years was stunned. Then, as if she had accepted her fate, a sad smile appeared on her face. That's right. Because it would definitely be very lonely. The Earth Child grinned and then reached out to Tianzi. Then let's go out together. I don't plan on throwing away such a useful thing like the Emperor's sword. But Tianzi still shook her head. You don't understand at all. Almost all of my sword owners' minds were affected by the resentment in the Emperor's sword and died an unnatural death in the end. Although the Emperor's sword does indeed have unparalleled power, it is also an undeniably ominous sword. I don't want to kill the owner of the Emperor's sword anymore. Sorry, my history isn't very good. I've never heard of such things, the Earth Child said unwaveringly. But I know that a drop of water will be repaid with a gushing spring. My dad was able to gather the medical fees all because of you. Now, you became like this because you saved us, so I will never give up on you. You're really an idiot. Tianzi wiped the corners of her eyes, even though she could no longer cry. But at this moment, she seemed to have suffered a severe headache. She held her head and screamed. Tianzi. The Earth Child wanted to get close to her, but she blew him far away with a wave of her hand. The resentment is all ready. Woo! Hurry! Run! The ink-like darkness once again swept through the Earth Child's vision. The Tianzi and the Emperor's sword stuck in the stone brick were also swallowed and disappeared in front of him. Before the Earth Child could decide whether to escape or find the Emperor's sword, the black something wrapped around his left foot. It was a black substance that was cold and sticky like mud. It was as if a shadow had come to life, causing the Earth Child to involuntarily have goosebumps all over his body. Then, the black mud spread towards the Earth Child's body. At the same time, two bright red spots of light appeared on the ground. This made the Earth Child immediately understand that this damn thing was the monsters in the haunted house. But without the Emperor's sword, he was already helpless against such things, just as the black mud wrapped around Chen Tuo's neck, and Chen Tuo had already accepted his fate, something arced through the air and hit the black mud. At the same time, a man's shout came from behind him. Mali Mali Hu, the Lord of the Heavens is as urgent as the law. With a bang, the lump of black mud retreated back into the shadows. The Earth Child coughed. Only then did he realize that the thing that hit the black mud was a small talisman. He looked behind him and realized that it was Ding Yang, who had already run away. Why, did you come back? Nonsense, leaving behind teammates and running away is definitely a side character that won't live past 3 chapters. How could a grand and righteous main character do such a thing? Ding Yang said something that Chen Tuo did not understand and helped him up from the ground. Since I brought you in, I have to bring you out in one piece. Uncle, stop talking nonsense, get ready to go. Carrying Chen Tuo, Ding Yang desperately ran toward the exit. But before they could reach the exit, their last ray of hope was swallowed up by the darkness once again. However, this wasn't the worst part. What was worse was that they didn't know when it started, but dense red dots of light had already appeared behind them. "I'm sorry, uncle, if it wasn't for me." Chen Tuo softly apologized in a depressed voice. Don't argue. Usually, when a main character in a xianxia novel is forced to this extent, his skills will improve greatly, and he will become a peerless master. The Ren and Du meridians are from wuxia novels, right? It's more or less the same. Just understand the essence. Although the two seemed to have the time to talk about such meaningless things, the Earth Child knew that Ding Yang was completely out of ideas. His trembling hands and head full of cold sweat revealed this. If he had known, he would have brought Tianzi out more decisively. Just as the densely packed red dots were about to close in on the two of them, there was a loud rumble. Not far away, the white light that signified the exit appeared again, but this time, 4 people emerged from it. To be precise, there were 3 people and a ghost. Oh, this mission is finally over. The main character, Su Xinxing, who had finally reappeared after several chapters, had a smile on his face. Then let's clean up quickly and take a plane back to Jiangjin to celebrate. Chapter 157. Let us temporarily rewind the scene to the morning. In a certain hotel in southern Chu, Emily gave a big yawn, rubbed her sleepy eyes, and woke up from her dreams. Her little stomach made a rumbling sound, which was the main reason the little girl woke up from her sleep. She turned her head to look at Su Xinxing, who was sleeping next to her. Because the little girl had used his arm as a pillow, Su Xinxing was currently snoring loudly on the bed. Although he wasn't particularly afraid of the heat, because he didn't need to pay extra money, the air conditioner, for Su Xinxing, was still extremely extravagant for the entire night. My stomach is hungry. Emily pushed Su Xinxing's face, but the latter only mumbled incoherently in his sleep. He waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly, and then went back to sleep. As a result, the little girl's face puffed up like a steamed bun. She jumped off the bed, and then clapped her hands together in front of the double bed. The bed was like an open book, and the head and tail of the bed suddenly joined together, sandwiching the still sleeping Su Xinxing between them like a ham in a sandwich. Ouch! A muffled scream came from inside. Although it didn't hurt, Su Xinxing naturally couldn't go back to sleep with such a sudden sound. Because the inn they were staying at didn't include breakfast, Su Xinxing, who was annoyed by Jasmine, could only change his clothes, yawn, and go out to buy breakfast in a half-asleep state. On the way, he ran into Xiao Jingyi, who was also planning to go out to eat breakfast. Compared to a few days ago, Xiao Jingyi's complexion and spirit were clearly much better today. In his words, it was as if he had one less person who was constantly yelling in his ear when he was sleeping. He could finally have a good night's sleep after not having had a long time. Southern Chu's Zilongbao and wontons were quite famous. In addition, with Xiao Jingyi as a free meal ticket, Su Xinxing naturally ordered 2 large bowls of each. He ate one on the spot and took the other away. In this regard, Xiao Jingyi could only smile bitterly at Su Xinxing's stingy personality, who would never let go of an opportunity to freeload, but he had nothing else to say. After all, Su Xinxing was not really that casual. He would only freeload the food and drinks of those he liked. In a sense, it was a way for Su Xinxing to show his closeness. Of course, the most important thing was still to save money for a meal. Speaking of which, is it really okay to continue like this? During breakfast, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but ask. His Yuanrong sword could roughly sense the direction of the Son of Heaven's sword. Last night, after making a reservation at the hotel, the Yuanrong sword discovered that the Son of Heaven's sword was moving towards a rural area in southern Chu. Originally, Xiao Jingyi wanted to cancel his reservation at the hotel and follow the direction of the Son of Heaven's sword. According to his thinking, the number of people in the rural area was limited. If he wanted to find the Son of Heaven's sword, it would definitely be much easier to find than in southern Chu, where there were hundreds of thousands of people. However, he was stopped by Su Shenxing. Don't worry. Mo Li discovered the Son of Heaven's sword yesterday. I also sent a ghost spirit to follow it. There won't be a problem. Su Shenxing swallowed a xiaolongbao in one bite. If an ordinary person ate like this, their tongue would definitely be scalded by the gravy in the steamed bun. However, for Su Shenxing, this degree of heat wasn't enough to break through his defenses. On the contrary, he could better enjoy the freshness of the gravy and the sweet and creamy taste of the steamed bun filling, which whetted his appetite. Oh, so that's how it is. Wait a moment, you found it yesterday? Xiao Zhengyi, who was about to eat a small wonton, stared blankly for a moment. Then, with an astonished expression, he said, then why didn't you say so earlier? If they had discovered the Son of Heaven's sword yesterday, then they could have completely solved all the problems in a short period of time. Then, they could have directly returned to Jiangjin yesterday. Yesterday, I took a look at the Son of Heaven's sword and its current owner. I discovered that the situation seemed to be a little different from what the Yuanrong sword said. Therefore, I plan to let the ghost spirit observe for a while before making a decision. After finishing the small wonton in 2 or 3 bites, Su Shenxing wiped his mouth and continued to answer. What about the truth? Xiao Zhengyi suddenly asked. In any case, even if we went back yesterday, we would have definitely failed our exams. We might as well travel for a few days at public expense. I'll bring breakfast to Mo Li first. Take your time to eat, it's not public expense. Don't run, you bastard. Back to the present, the black mass of monsters gathered together. It looked like a large dark cloud had smashed onto the ground. Black smoke billowed and surged toward the exit and the few people. But before they could get close to Su Shenxing and his group, they were easily dispersed by Su Shenxing with a wave of his hand. F***CK, could this be the legendary grandpa who suddenly appeared to save the day when the protagonist fell into a desperate situation and gave him a peerless martial arts and a peerless beauty granddaughter? Ding Yang patted his head, his eyes shining. I don't think so. Earthchild no longer had the energy to complain about this guy. The most powerful thing about the haunted house was that it had accumulated ghost energy over a long period of time. Even if the black smoke-like monsters were torn to pieces, they would quickly regenerate. It was just like how shadows would definitely form in places where there was light and light. It was a phenomenal situation. Thus, Su Shenxing, who realized that it was useless to just use his fists, simply asked for the holy sword. Then, with one sword, he sent all the ghost energy to meet their fellow villagers in the underworld. However, the matter was not completely resolved. As mentioned before, the Emperor's sword contained far more grievous energy than the haunted house. After the haunted house was broken by Su Shenxing through brute force, what was left was naturally the Emperor's sword in the center of the haunted house and the sword spirit girl who had been completely swallowed by the grievous energy. As expected, it still ended up like this. The sword spirit of the Yuanrong sword looked at the sword spirit of the Emperor's sword, who had been completely demonized. He could not help but feel sad for the death of the rabbit. Su Shenxing did not say anything. He just walked toward the sword spirit girl who was draped in a black grievous energy robe. Her eyes were emitting scarlet light, and her face was devoid of any rationality. Wait a minute. Chen Tuo seemed to have guessed something. His face was pale as he wanted to stop Su Shenxing. However, Ding Yang held him tightly. Roar! The demonized sword spirit girl roared and pounced towards Su Shenxing. Su Shenxing did not draw his sword. Instead, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at her. With the strength of his fist, there was currently no living creature on Earth that could survive after being hit by it. If this punch landed, the sword spirit girl would probably be reduced to ashes. However, just as the fist was about to touch her, Su Shenxing suddenly retracted his fist. Therefore, although the fist did not directly touch her, the power of the fist wind still hit the sword spirit girl. However, for some reason, the sword spirit girl stopped in her tracks, as if she was not affected by the fist wind at all. Instead, a lot of black fog was blown out of her body by the powerful fist wind. Oh right, sword spirits are immune to physical attacks. Xiao Zhengyi hammered his palm. He remembered that he could not touch the sword spirit of the Yuanrong sword and suddenly understood Su Shenqing's actions. If Su Shenqing's fist really touched the sword spirit girl, regardless of whether she was immune to physical attacks, King Kong was not bad, or immortal, she would definitely die. However, in this situation, the only thing that could cause damage was the fist wind. Although he did not know why the fist wind could blow out resentment, it was the absolute truth that it was effective. Most of the resentment was blown out by Su Shenqing's fist and returned to its original appearance. However, because its power was extremely weak, it retracted back into the sword. Su Shenqing pulled out the sword and threw it to Tu Wazi. Since you're the one who awakened this thing, you're her sword master. This thing is still too dangerous for ordinary people. I need to be able to monitor you at all times. From today onwards, you'll transfer to Jiangjin. But I've already dropped out of school. Tu Wazi was a little confused. Just drop out of school and go back to school. As for the tuition. Hey, you can pay for it, right? Su Shenqing said the latter half of the sentence to Ding Yang. No problem, master, please tell me what to do. Ding Yang nodded hurriedly. However, his expression immediately changed. Master, be careful behind you. Without waiting for him to finish, Su Shenqing casually swung the sword behind him and sent the resentment gathering that intended to attack him to meet its relatives in the haunted house. Any other questions? Su Shenqing asked as he put away the sword. No. Ding Yang shook his head respectfully. That's good. Su Shenqing then made an okay gesture to Xiao Zhengyi, who had an expression of, I knew it. Let's go home. We'll talk about the rest when we get home. Chapter 158. I refuse. Because there weren't enough days to attend, Su Shenqing, who usually failed his subjects, could only bitterly participate in the school's tutoring during the summer vacation. At this time, he was busy with the homework left by his advanced mathematics teacher. With an impatient expression, he rejected Xiao Zhengyi, who had specially come to ask him to assist in the investigation. By the way, Qin Xingyan had taken Chihaya Fukuyama to the Earth Loli's place for special training. It was estimated that they wouldn't be back until nighttime. Why do you have to come find me every time something happens? Isn't that super birth thing of yours useless? It's the super administrative office. Fang Shaoqing, who was following behind Xiao Zhengyi, quietly corrected him. That's about right. No, it's far from right. Xiao Zhengyi muttered in his heart. However, as the one asking for help, he naturally wouldn't say this out loud. Instead, he continued to persuade, because the guy this time is more troublesome. In short, he's not someone ordinary people can deal with. The cause of the matter had to be explained from the ongoing exhibition. Perhaps some readers have already forgotten, but before Su Shenqing and his party left for southern Chu, Jiangjin was about to hold a grand exhibition. Xiao Zhengyi's Yuanrong sword was obtained from there. After Xiao Zhengyi and his party solved the problem of the emperor's sword and returned to Jiangjin, they were informed by Su Feng that a strange thief had appeared at the exhibition. As for why he used the word strange thief instead of thief, it was because the other party had imitated what they saw on TV. Before the theft, they had actually sent out 3 notices in succession. They wanted to steal 3 different exhibits at different times. However, after Jiangjin's Public Security Bureau laid down layers of blockades, the other party succeeded without anyone noticing. Realizing that there was definitely something supernatural going on, Su Feng simply applied to set up defenses there. It was said that he and Antares were prepared to sleep on the floor of the exhibition. However, the items were still stolen. At this point, Su Shenxing finally became a little interested. Although he didn't have a good impression of the middle-aged fox Su Feng, as the leader of the super administrative office, the other party still had the ability to be able to steal from him without him noticing. It seemed that the thief was indeed not simple. Didn't the surveillance camera record anything? Su Shenxing asked. Before the other party acted, they seemed to have used some method to hack into the computer inside and destroyed all the surveillance cameras. Xiao Zhengyi shrugged his shoulders as he replied. If he could find any important clues from the surveillance camera, he wouldn't have risked being thrown out of the door by Mo Li to ask Su Shenxing's help. You guys really don't even know what happened? Thinking, asked. If there were no clues at all, then it would be a bit troublesome. After all, Su Shenxing was only strong enough to fly on the level of combat power, but in terms of perception and insight, he was at most at the average level of his former comrades. The station chief suspects that the man has some kind of special hypnotic power. Even though none of the officers at the scene noticed it, after his investigation, he realized that all the officers at the scene, including himself and Elder Shinsu, seemed to have lost several minutes of their memory, and the criminal might have made his move during that period of time. When Xiao Zhengyi saw that Su Shenxing seemed to be a little interested in this matter, he immediately took out the information on his side. Simply put, it was to cut off the memories of everyone around him during the time of the crime, so that those people's memories before and after the crime were seamlessly connected to achieve the effect of no one being able to remember his appearance. If it wasn't for the unique ability of certain races, the criminal's control of the curse was probably at the level of a master. Therefore, Su Shenxing simply told Xiao Zhengyi his conjecture. Speaking of which, old Su, can you withstand the other party's magic? Xiao Zhengyi pondered for a few seconds before asking thoughtfully. Generally speaking, in this world, there is no curse or supernatural power that can cause too much damage to me. Su Shenxing patted his chest confidently. Generally speaking. Xiao Zhengyi's eyes widened. That means there are exceptions, right? That's surprising, I thought you were already immune to poison. Of course, poison was useless. Even if it was melted copper juice, Su Shenxing could drink it as Fanta, but if he ate high-grade seafood, he would have to lie in bed. Well, because my resistance to curse is passive, no matter if it's buffs or curses, they won't have any effect on me, but this is based on the result of others' casting. Su Shenxing said mysteriously. But old Su, I remember that you don't know how to cast spells, right? Although it's not something to be proud of, please allow me to emphasize again that our protagonist is an idiot who doesn't know how to cast spells. Even if he sealed Mo Li and had a huge amount of magic power in his body, he still couldn't cast spells. He couldn't even release his magic power to create simple magic cannons. That's right, I don't know how to cast spells, but Mo Li can. Su Shenxing put down the ballpoint pen in his hand and made a gesture to show off behind him. Thus, Mo Li, who was munching on the potato chips that Chihaya Fukuyama bought for her, was exposed to the three of them. The girl seemed to feel something and turned around to look at them. She tilted her head in confusion. Because of this movement, her long blonde ponytail flowed over her shoulder and flowed down her chest like a golden waterfall. Then, as if she suddenly realized something, the girl handed the bag of potato chips to Su Shenxing. No need, I don't like to eat this. Su Shenxing looked at the label on the bag that said, New Australian Lobster Flavor, and couldn't help but laugh dryly. But then, as if he remembered something, he said to Mo Li, speaking of which, you've been eating too many snacks recently, right? After you finish this bag, you're not allowed to eat anything before dinner, understand? Understood. Mo Li replied expressionlessly. Nodding with satisfaction, Su Shenxing cleared his throat and continued, Mo Li and I, in a sense, are of the same mind. As long as I'm willing to accept it, Mo Li's magic will work on me. Of course, even so, the effect will be greatly reduced. Really? Can you demonstrate it? Xiao Zhengyi asked excitedly. You're so annoying. I just have a strong desire for knowledge. Su Shenxing, who couldn't persuade Xiao Jingyi, could only sigh and let Mo Li turn around again to prepare a magic. It's best to have that kind of intuitive change. If it's an ordinary blessing or something, because it can't be seen with the naked eye, there's no need. After thinking about it, Su Xinxing added. Jasmine closed her eyes and pondered for a while. Then, she opened her eyes and gave Su Xinxing a thumbs up. She looked as if she had achieved her goal. Under the expectant gaze of Xiao Jingyi and Fang Xiaoqing, the girl raised her hands and shouted, Ballora energy. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Su Xinxing just muttered a sentence, and his whole body disappeared with a bang. And at the place where he was originally sitting, a black cat appeared. Meow, WTF. The black cat's face was confused, and it couldn't understand what had happened. Speaking of which, Sakura apartment doesn't allow pets. Mo Li seemed to think of something and hammered his hand, then grabbed Su Xinxing by the back of his neck and threw him out. Landlord, wait until you turn back into a human before you come back. The girl gave a thumbs up. I'll eat snacks for dinner and get through it. Meow, you're just doing this for snacks, aren't you? Looking at Su Xinxing who turned into a black cat, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but feel confused. What the hell is going on? Chapter 159. Su Xinxing walked alone on the street. Originally, even if he turned into a cat, Su Xinxing was undoubtedly the strongest cat in the world. It was not difficult for him to sneak into Sakura apartment with his own skills. But when he was about to put his plan into action, he bumped into Songyu at the door of the apartment. For some reason, when the girl looked at him with shining eyes, he felt a sense of fear. In the end, he lost to his biological instincts and ran away. When he came back to his senses, he was already on the streets of Jiangjin. Most of Mo Li's magic was sealed in Su Xinxing's body. If Su Xinxing knew how to use magic, he could use his current magic, which was far more powerful than Mo Li's, to break this spell in one go. The problem was, as a magic idiot, Su Xinxing could not even do a simple counterspell with magic power. Based on Mo Li's current situation, this transformation spell could at most last for 3 days. If he was lucky, he might be able to change back to his original state in 2 days. In short, first, he had to make sure that he had food for dinner. Because of his human dignity as a hero, Su Xinxing would rather rob Xiao Jingyi than go through the trash like a real wild cat. But he did not know if it was because he had been taking the blame for Su Xinxing recently, but this time, Xiao Jingyi was unexpectedly smart. When he saw that the situation was not good, he actually took his junior and escaped. It seemed that he could only rob Su Feng. After making such a decision in his heart, Su Xinxing casually found a tree and climbed up. He wanted to recognize the road from a higher vantage point. After all, things looked completely different from usual from this height. Even his sense of direction had a subtle error. Meow, oh, so it's here now. Just as he was still trying to determine his position, he heard the voices of girls below. Sister Wenhua, that kitten seems to be unable to get down from the tree. Wow, it's really a kitten, berry flower. So, apricot flower, please. You are the older sisters, okay? Why do you want me to go? I don't know how to climb trees. The 3 girls who looked like sisters were quarreling under the tree, which attracted Su Xinxing's attention. At this time, they seemed to have discussed something and were trying to reach the branch where Su Xinxing was through the human pyramid. However, the problem was that the 3 girls' physical strength wasn't too strong. After they finished folding the arhut, they were still at least a meter away from the tree branch. Looking at the 3 wobbly people, Su Xinxing sighed helplessly and jumped down from the branch. Sister Wenhua, that kitten jumped down by itself. I see it. But Barry, hold on a little tighter. I think it's shaking a little too much, he's more than powerful. Hurry and catch me, I'm going to fall, your little sister is going to fall. In the end, Su Xinxing could only watch helplessly from the side as the 3 sisters fell into a pile. How should he put it, he felt that these three girls were a little clumsy, woo-woo. I feel like we're being looked down upon by the kitten. The girl called Berry Flower mumbled with a sad face. It must be an illusion, it won't scare me. Wenhua answered decisively. In short, after regrouping, the three girls looked awkwardly at Su Xinxing, who hadn't left. Sister Wenhua, what should we do now? Can we raise this child? Berry Flower wanted to hug Su Xinxing, but he nimbly avoided her. It's a little difficult. The place we live doesn't allow pets. Wenhua thought for a while and decisively passed the responsibility to her youngest sister. Why don't you ask Apricot Flower? That's why you asked me. Apricot Flower wanted to cry but had no tears. Su Xinxing thought for a while and suddenly felt that following these little girls to eat and drink seemed to be a good idea. Not to mention other things, at least it was more beautiful than Su Feng, wasn't it? Thus, he began to learn from our national treasure, the panda. He obviously had the ability to become the overlord of the land, but he chose to act cute for a living, dividing line. The plan was very successful. After acting cute, Su Xinxing was carried in Berry's arms and brought to the three sisters' home. In Wenhua's words, this wasn't adopting the Xiaohei cat, it was just taking care of it for a while before it found an owner. The only unfortunate thing was that the three sisters were young, at most about the same age as Mo Li, so their chest armor was very hard. Su Xinxing, who was carried in their arms, enjoyed the treatment of a washboard. Other than saying, what the f*ck, it's so hard, he didn't have any other thoughts. Of course, normal people wouldn't have prepared cat food at home, so the girls just fried a piece of fish cake for Su Xinxing and poured him a lot of milk. Su Xinxing was very satisfied with this meal. In order to repay the kindness of this meal, Su Xinxing decided to try his best to help this family fulfill a wish before returning to Sakura apartment. After eating and drinking, Su Xinxing strolled around the apartment that wasn't too big. Not long after, he confirmed the family situation through the notes in the house and the girls' diaries. First of all, the three sisters' father had a glorious past. He started a very famous company from scratch. But with the downturn of the world economy, his company eventually went bankrupt. He could only sell his house and car, and bring his family to live in a cheaper apartment. However, the three sisters' father obviously didn't give up. At the age of 40, he had been trying to make a comeback. Using a sentence in his notebook, it was, since I was able to start from scratch in the past, of course, I can do it now. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. They knew that their father's business hadn't improved. Coincidentally, the three sisters' mother was a police officer, and now she was part of the criminal investigation team. She was a member of the team to prevent the thief from continuing to steal from the museum exhibition. On the other hand, the three sisters' thoughts were much simpler. They just wanted their parents to be happy. In this way, he could more or less understand what he needed to do. If it was intentional, for Su Xinxing, it wouldn't be difficult to help the three sisters' father earn some money. In fact, he was quite good at pretending to be mysterious. In short, because it wouldn't be too long, he couldn't help the three sisters' father regain his glory. However, in the case of paying off his debts, it shouldn't be a problem to accumulate enough capital. As for the three sisters' mother, it was even easier. As long as he helped Xiao Jingyi catch the so-called monster thief, everything would be fine. In this way, he should be able to retire successfully. Moreover, he could also fulfill Xiao Jingyi's request. It was like killing two birds with one stone. Chapter 160. The three sisters of the Yin family seemed to be very famous in the neighborhood. Although Su Xinxing did not intentionally eavesdrop, he still heard some rumors from some neighbors. Because their parents were busy with work, they did not seem to have the time to take care of the three sisters. Therefore, under the influence of the eldest sister, Wenhua, the three girls developed some strange hobbies in the end. The eldest sister, Wenhua, liked and believed in the existence of Uma, unidentified life form. She even put it into action. She spent all day in Jiangjin looking for some Uma mentioned in the local urban legends in Jiangjin. The second sister, and Blue Flower, was slightly better than the eldest sister. She just narrowed the target of her passion from all unidentified life forms to aliens. It was said that she once set up a strange magic circle on the rooftop of her apartment to call for aliens. Of course, nothing happened in the end. The youngest sister, Xinghua, was the most normal in a sense. Her values were the closest to the average person. Other than being afraid of ghosts and spirits, and believing that people would turn into ghosts after they died, there was not much strange about her. However, after Su Xinqing stayed at the Yin family for a night, he had a preliminary understanding of the three little girls. To put it simply, the eldest sister, Wenhua, was an idiot with super high mobility. The second sister, Blue Flower, was a natural nerd who had a sister complex. The third sister, Xinghua, was a complaining slave who overworked herself to death. It was worth mentioning that these three little guys who looked about the same age as Mo Li were still primary school students. This was not strange. Based on appearance alone, even if Mo Li was thrown into primary school, it would not be strange. It was just that Su Xinqing was afraid that she would explode the earth in anger because of the naughty children's harassment, so he arranged for her to be in junior high school. Clang clang. I don't know how many representative meetings have been held in the Yin family. And Wenhua stood shakily on the racing seat. At the same time, Su Xinqing felt that she would fall down at any time, and at the same time, he announced condescendingly. The remaining two little girls had completely different expressions. And Blue Flower's face was full of excitement, and she clapped her hands hard. And Xinghua, on the other hand, had a helpless expression, and clapped her hands very perfunctorily. Mom hasn't had a good rest for a few days because of the case of the strange robbers. We have to do our best to catch the criminals. And Wenhua continued. Then, she lowered her voice and said softly with a serious face, I'm guessing that the culprit this time is probably the legendary Uma Punkavik. Meow. Hearing the unexpected words, Su Xinqing couldn't help but look up. Legend has it that Punkavik can turn invisible and is hostile to humans. If that's the case, why would he steal things? Even if he did, he wasn't caught by Mom and the other police officers. The young girl seemed to be very satisfied with her deduction. She followed the example of an adult and crossed her arms in front of her chest, nodding her head with her eyes closed. As a result, she fell from the racing chair. Fortunately, Su Xinqing ran down in time to cushion her fall. Otherwise, she might have been injured. Wah, Sister Wenhua, are you okay? And Blue Flower ran over and asked worriedly. I'm okay. Sesame paste cushioned my fall. It doesn't hurt at all, the girl replied with lingering fear. By the way, sesame paste was the name that the three sisters had discussed for the entire night before they finally decided on. And it was much better than the name Slender Cat, Slender Man, also known as the Slender Ghost Shadow, Still Boy, the one from Interstellar Baby, or Train, the one from the Buddhist scriptures that carried evil people to hell. Speaking of which, these three little guys had surprisingly rich knowledge of miscellaneous subjects. Sesame paste, are you okay? Wenhua said as she picked up Su Xinqing and carefully examined him. However, even if she didn't use Cloud Scale, this level of attack wouldn't cause any harm to Su Xinqing. Meow. So, Su Xinqing broke away from the girl's hand and went back to the sofa. Originally, he thought that the girl said Punkavik because she had some evidence, but it turned out that it was just a wild guess. With all due respect, Sister Wenhua, I think that Punkavik is probably made up by foreigners. At times like this, we shouldn't make wild guesses. We should use science. Barry, who had calmed down, tried to correct Wenhua's opinion. In my opinion, it's very likely that aliens did this. Thus, Su Xinqing and Apricot, who was listening at the side, showed an expression that said, no, you're just making wild guesses. I think that without investigation, we don't have the right to speak. The youngest Apricot sighed. So, no matter what, we should go to the scene of the incident and investigate, right? Eh. At times like this, shouldn't little apricot think that the incident was caused by ghosts? Wenhua tilted her head and said with a mischievous smile. Of course not. Anyway, ghosts are already dead. What use do they have for antiques? Apricot complained. Wenhua lowered her head and thought hard for a while. Then, she raised her head and said with uncertainty, money makes the world go round? That's not what you mean, to hurt each other. Berry raised her hand and interrupted the sisters' interaction. If you don't know the meaning of a catchphrase, don't use it. You guys should be more familiar with it. In the end, the two girls, who were nominally older sisters, were suppressed by the youngest sister's imposing manner. Looking at her older sister who was obediently listening to her scolding, Apricot sighed again. Really, why do I have to accompany you to fool around? Because we're free during the summer vacation. Wenhua blinked and immediately answered. Oh, I feel bad for not being able to refute that. Apricot covered her chest and groaned. Speaking of which, there was still tutoring for failing classes today. Not good. She could already foresee the teacher's cold gaze after the incident. Su Xinxing, who was lying on the sofa, was about to cry because of the difficulties she was about to encounter. In short, just like what I said before, if we don't investigate, we don't have the right to make wild guesses. I peeked at Mom's shift schedule. She's on shift today, so it shouldn't be a problem for us to sneak in. Apricot coughed and continued to pretend to be an adult. But how do we find clues? Berry raised her hand and asked, the police must have already searched all the places that can be found, right? We can only talk about this when the time comes, but I have a way to increase the success rate. Apricot looked at Su Xinxing with a smile. It said that cats have an average of 240 million olfactory cells, which is higher than dogs which have an average of 220 million. Of course, the olfactory cells of dogs differed greatly due to the different types of dogs. For example, a normal police dog had about 300 million olfactory cells. Wenhua and Berry's gaze fell on Su Xinxing, who didn't realize the impending disaster and was still lamenting about her future tutoring. Meow. When Su Xinxing felt a chill down her spine because of the three sisters' gazes, everything was too late. Chapter 161. 2 consecutive failures made the Jiangjin Public Security Bureau extremely passive. If it wasn't for the fact that the stolen item wasn't too valuable, the pot-bellied bureau chief would have already been fired. Even so, there was an extremely solemn and gloomy atmosphere among the police stationed in the museum. If the same thing happened a third time, then they would really lose all their face. Even so, they couldn't even find a single clue, let alone a criminal. If they were to say that they would be able to catch the culprit the third time, perhaps not many people were confident. Some of the police even thought that this was a supernatural incident. Because of this incident, even the museum was temporarily closed to visitors. In this kind of atmosphere, Li Tenghua checked whether the infrared alarm was working properly as if there was no one around. Sister Tenghua, your daughter seems to have come to see you. A member of her team quickly walked over and reported to her respectfully. Which one is it? Wenhua or Berry Hua? Xinghua is more obedient, she shouldn't be here to cause trouble. Li Tenghua mumbled. Ah, the 3 ladies are here, the policeman smiled bitterly, as if he was in a difficult position. Although the mischievous little girls were considered frequent visitors at the police station, so almost everyone recognized them. However, the current situation wasn't good, so it wasn't the time to play with the children. And they are leading a black cat, saying that they want to help catch the thief, nonsense. Li Tenghua scolded and walked to the entrance of the museum with a stern face. Mom! The first person to see her was Wenhua. Li Tenghua's stern expression didn't have any deterrent effect, the little girl ran over with a smile. Who asked you to come? Li Tenghua wasn't someone who couldn't distinguish between public and private matters, so she continued to ask with a stern face. At the same time, she also saw the cat that the team member was talking about. It was a pitiful Xiaohei cat, whose neck was tied by a dog leash that Barry found somewhere. It was quietly hanging in the air, the cat's face sad. Speaking of which, in this kind of situation that was similar to hanging, it was already incredible that the cat didn't burp. We are also here to help. Wenhua raised the leash and argued for her sister. Because of her action, the cat that gave up struggling also swayed left and right like a pendulum. How to put it, it felt a little pitiful. Xinghua, I thought you were the most sensible. Because the eldest and second children were both idiots, Li Tenghua directly looked at her younger daughter. The latter looked away guiltily and stammered, I have already advised my sisters, liar, at that time you were clearly very happy to participate in the discussion. Su Xinxing, who had already given up on life and become a useless cat, complained in his heart. Anyway, go home now. Don't cause any trouble here. Got it? Li Tenghua's sisters Xiaohei, she let's go play with the kids. Lu, the policeman's the three girls' three sisters, the policeman, that they, the policeman looked at the three sisters' disappointed and pitiful expressions and couldn't help but persuade them. And I think that if the young ladies appear, it will definitely boost everyone's morale. Are you all lelicons in the police station? Su Xinxing continued to mutter to himself. Of course, this was only due to the prejudice of lelicons. In fact, the police officers all knew these little girls, so they wouldn't feel estranged or overly vigilant just because they were unfamiliar with them. Children had the ability to make adults happy, so it was indeed best to use them to adjust the atmosphere. Li Tenghua thought about it and felt that it made sense. Plus, when the museum opened, she and her husband were busy with work and didn't have time to play with these little guys, so she felt a little guilty. Thus, she sighed. Okay, it's not impossible to let you guys play for a while. Really? Thank you, Mom. That's great, Sister Wenhua. The two silly girls cheered. Even Xinghua let out a sigh of relief. The black cat was swung around like a meteor hammer because of Xinghua's unconscious movements. The cat's face was filled with despair as it moved in a circle at a uniform speed. Wait a minute, you guys should know these words, right? Li Tenghua stopped the girls from cheering and pointed at the sign at the entrance of the museum. On it were the words, pets and food are not allowed in the museum. Below it was an image of a dog and a chicken leg. There was also a big red cross on top to indicate that it was forbidden. Mom, listen to me, Wenhua said with a serious face as she pointed at the black cat that finally stopped. Sesame paste is not our pet. Based on this development, it should be something like, it's our friend. Su Xinxing guessed in his heart. Li Tenghua also had an expression of, I almost guessed it, or, what kind of stupid name is this cat given? It's our backup food. Meow, wait, so you already had this in mind when you named me. Give me back my trust in you guys. Su Xinxing started to struggle again. Unfortunately, food is also forbidden in the museum. A mother knows her daughter best. Li Tenghua did not waver in the slightest. She only patted the sign and continued. This is a blind spot. Wenhua's little face was shocked. That was a mistake. Barry hugged her sister as if she was sorry that she didn't think of this in advance. That's why I said from the beginning that we couldn't get away with this, right? Apricot looked coldly at her two stupid sisters. But because of this, because the restraint was reduced, the black cat's feet could finally reach the ground. Su Xinxing shrunk his head, broke free from the dog's leash, and quickly ran into the museum after regaining his freedom. Not good, let everyone catch it. Li Tenghua immediately yelled at the policeman beside her. There were many valuable things in the museum. If the cat broke a few of them, it would be troublesome. After all, the responsibility was ultimately on her side. If her husband received the compensation letter, he would definitely faint. Okay, I'll let them do it now. The policeman also knew the severity of the situation. He immediately ran into the museum and prepared to mobilize all the police forces to catch the black cat. "Look at what you guys have done." Li Tenghua originally wanted to scold them, but when she turned around, she realized that her daughter was gone. She looked around and realized that the girls had already shouted something like, "Sesame paste, don't run," and ran into the museum with the black cat. This made the policewoman click her tongue in anger and quickly run into the museum. Chapter 162. Thanks to the Yuan Rong sword incident, Su Xinxing had some understanding of the layout of the exhibition hall, so he was not completely clueless. If he remembered correctly, the two stolen items were a fist-sized pottery bowl that was claimed to be an antique from the Yuan dynasty, but its age was unknown, and a small bronze cauldron from the Warring States period. The former was said to have been stolen from the tomb robbers in the Xiaxia area 20 years ago. They had tried various methods but failed to determine its age. In the end, the local research institute handed it over to the exhibition to prevent it from occupying the research resources. After all, there were quite a lot of ancient tombs in the Xiaxia area, and one could find an antique just by taking a few steps in the wild. The local archaeological research institute had long been filled with all kinds of things to be studied. The latter used to be an antique passed down from ancient times in a Taoist temple in the suburbs of Xianyang City. Later, during the Four Olds period, the Taoist temple was smashed, and the things inside were burned, smashed, and robbed. This antique was also lost among the people. In the end, because the original owner felt sorry for it, he donated it to the country when he could not find the temple. Because there was no professional identification certificate, the valuations of the two items were not high. They were the kind of things that had a certain historical value but were actually worthless. If the robber had not made such a big move like the criminal notice, it would not have caused such a big uproar even if it was lost. However, one could not just look at the surface. According to Qin Xingyan, who had seen the photos of the two stolen items, the former was the small pottery bowl. Although she could not recognize it, the bronze cauldron that was smaller than a wash basin was a real Taoist relic. Many of the things that looked like patterns on it were, in fact, encrypted words in the Taoist scriptures. According to the description, it should be a treasure that was originally used to store elixirs in the Taoist temple. However, since it was smashed by some mortals, it meant that the orthodoxy of the Taoist temple was likely to have been lost long ago. Then there was the last item, which was announced to be taken away today. It was a mahogany carving, about 20 centimeters high, of the heavenly Lord Yuanshi holding the three treasures jade rui scepter. This thing was also not an antique. It was said that it was just a casual work of a slightly famous sculptor in the Republic of China who was entrusted by a certain Taoist temple. The evaluation of this thing by experts was that it had a certain historical value and artistic value. Although there was no room for appreciation, it could be collected and admired. It was very tactfully pointed out that this thing could not be sold for money. Su Xinxing sat cross-legged under the display case, staring at the statue. After turning into a cat, although her strength was limited to a certain extent because she was not used to this body, even the blessing of the 10,000 races, which allowed her to understand language, had disappeared, her senses had become much sharper. Even so, he still couldn't sense what was so special about this thing. Could it be that the thief really didn't have any other motives and just wanted to make a big news? In this world, there shouldn't be such a joker, right? Su Xinxing wagged his tail uncertainly and racked his brains. Then, like a real cat, he got up lightly and nimbly went around the booth, avoiding the police who were trying to catch him from behind. Next, he would go to see the two exhibition halls that had been stolen. Among the crowd, people were shouting, "Where is it going? Hurry up and stop it." "No, it's going to slip away, the cat is drifting, this is the legendary whirlwind charging tornado, so fast, are all Jiang Jin's cat's monsters." In the midst of the commotion, Su Xinxing happily made a decision and easily got rid of the police. He came to the exhibition hall where the pottery pot had been placed before. In this exhibition hall, he still couldn't sense the aura of magic or supernatural power, but considering that the theft had happened 2 days ago, the weak aura might have disappeared long ago. Meow, well, wait a minute, just as Su Xinxing was about to leave, he vaguely felt that something was wrong with his cat's intuition. So he carefully went around the exhibition hall that was too big for his current body, looking for the source of this strange feeling. More than half an hour later, while avoiding the police who came to look for him, Su Xinxing also found something. In a corner of the exhibition hall, there was a small hole that looked like a mouse hole. If he hadn't become small now, maybe it would have been really difficult to find this hole. Although the hole wasn't big, it was still big enough to fit the stolen pottery bowl. That was to say, it was very likely that the stolen pottery bowl was taken from here. Su Xinxing thought for a moment and felt that it was useless to just think about it. So, like a cat sharpening its claws, he pulled the hole a little bigger. Then, he lowered his body and crawled in. He dug the soil to expand the hole as he slowly moved forward. Fortunately, after passing through the hole, the tunnel in the hole was still quite spacious, otherwise, Su Xinxing would have been stuck in it. If he wanted to come out, he would have to make a lot of noise. After going in for a while, the front suddenly opened up. Su Xinxing then noticed that he seemed to have gone under the museum. Because it was located in the suburbs, the exhibition hall didn't spend money to dig an underground garage. Instead, it circled a piece of land in front of it as a parking lot, which also meant that there was nothing under the museum. Meow, holy sh*t. However, what appeared in front of Su Xinxing was a space about the size of an indoor basketball court, maybe slightly shorter. In the center, there was a small village. The houses in this village were about the size of a microwave oven, and the residents were humanoid creatures similar in size to mice. Because they were hardly exposed to the sun, their skin showed a pale color, and their faces were somewhat similar to a race called goblin that Su Xinxing had encountered in another world before. However, compared to the goblin, these creatures were obviously much smaller, and they had a tumor-like organ on their forehead. It was worth mentioning that the only light source in this underground village was the crystal-clear luminous mushrooms cultivated by some unknown method, and the fields that these humanoid creatures cultivated only had various kinds of mushrooms or wood ears. From the function of their clothes, which were similar to clothes, but in fact, were grown from fungi, it could be seen that these little creatures' technology seemed to have been invested in the cultivation of fungi. Because the scene in front of him was so incredible, even Su Xinxing was stunned for a while before he realized what was going on. A group of unknown supernatural creatures had actually settled in Jiangjin under his nose without anyone noticing. Chapter 163. At first, when they saw Su Xinxing turn into a black cat, the little creatures were frightened. They felt like a white-headed worm that suddenly jumped into the village during the farming era. Especially when this guy was invulnerable and didn't have the weakness of becoming weak after coming in contact with water, he was obviously a bigger threat. The group of unknown creatures made strange noises while taking out spears that looked like they were modified from chopsticks and keys. They nervously confronted Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing waited there for a long time, but found that the other side didn't seem to have any supernatural attacks at all. So he spent about 30 seconds suppressing these little creatures. He spent so much time chasing them back, and then tried to communicate with them. Meow 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 meow, at #%yen#. Well, they couldn't communicate as expected. So Su Xinxing made a throat-slitting gesture to the humanoid creatures, meaning that if they couldn't communicate, they could only die. Obviously, they understood this universal gesture and immediately panicked. Suddenly, one of the little creatures walked out confidently, and then, beep beep beep, beep, beep beep beep, beep 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 beep, beep 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 beep. It patted the ground with both hands, and it seemed to be using Morse code. It seemed that these little creatures weren't really isolated from the world, and still had knowledge about the outside world. Unfortunately, meow, sorry, I don't understand Morse code. No. The creature hugged its head and made a painful sound. Then, Su Xinxing and the creature were stunned. Meow, seems like we can communicate. I understand. Oh, my God, for the sake of the goddess of nature, why don't you sit down with us and have a drink? The little creature's tone was inexplicably translating, I don't think we need to be so, hostile to each other, right? Su Xinxing immediately understood the situation. It seemed that the effect of Mo Li's magic was starting to fade, and the effect of the blessing of all races that allowed Su Xinxing to communicate with other races was back. Meow, why not? Therefore, Su Xinxing didn't refuse and followed the strange creature, who might or might not be the village chief, to their village. Probably because they knew that they couldn't beat Su Xinxing no matter what, so these little creatures didn't continue to waste their energy using chopsticks to warn him. But when Su Xinxing arrived at their door, he found himself in an awkward situation. Even though he had transformed into a cat, he was still too big for the door of these small creatures. He couldn't enter their door at all. Fortunately, the little creatures knew what was good for them. They immediately took out the things inside, and it looked like they were going to have an outdoor party. After that, the leading little creature began to introduce itself to Su Xinxing. Their species was called Pankovic, and they originally lived near the Pyrenees in Spain. They had been thriving since the Middle Ages. Since they were not a pure supernatural species, the thin aura did not affect them much. It was just that their invisibility had weakened. It wasn't until a camper accidentally caught one of them that their existence was exposed, and they were called the Girona dwarfs. Although the Valhinian knights acted quickly and immediately blocked the news, and claimed that it was just a prank, it still attracted a large number of tourists to the Pyrenees to look for traces of them. In order not to be caught, the Girona dwarfs had no choice but to start migrating. About half a month ago, a supernatural creature had found them and asked for their help. The creature had promised to help them find a new habitat if they were successful. Meow, help. What help? It asked us to help it steal a human's pottery bowl and keep it safe. Because our species has the invisibility ability, it wasn't difficult to do this. But it came to us yesterday to take the bowl back. The other party replied honestly. Meow, do you remember what it looked like? Sorry, because it used magic to cover its whole body every time it came, we didn't see its real appearance. So that's how it was. The criminal didn't steal it himself, but let this special creature do it. This way, even if they were discovered, they wouldn't be in any danger. But this way, the subtle time difference that appeared in all the police's senses and the seamless surveillance footage that was missing a few seconds was a little strange. Since he had entrusted the theft to other creatures, these two actions were completely superfluous. Instead, they would expose his true identity. Not only that, but the crime premonition was also very strange. Why did it ask someone else to catch them? Meow, anyway, I'll let you go for now. In the future, you have to live a good life in Jiangjin, and don't cause trouble for me, okay? Oh my God, this is too strange. How can a single word, meow, contain so much information? Got it, I swear we'll do that in the future, for sure. All in all, it seemed that the clues here ended here. After bidding farewell to the Girona dwarfs, Su Xinxing went back to the museum through the tunnel. But this time, he was a little unlucky. The moment he came out, he was caught by the three little girls. Sesame paste, didn't I say you can't run around? Wenhua angrily grabbed Su Xinxing's stomach and lifted him up high. Let go of me, little brat, I'm the one who's scared when I get angry. Obviously, Su Xinxing's fierce shout didn't reach the girls. Very quickly, under Wenhua's instructions, Strawberry tied the dog leash back to Su Xinxing's neck. I think we can relax a little. Sesame paste is going to be strangled to death. Apricot said on Su Xinxing's side, making Su Xinxing, who was choked by fate, feel very touched. If he's really going to be strangled to death, we won't be able to escape if we meet Mommy. Apricot continued. Enough, you three brats, I'm really going to get angry. But before Su Xinxing could get angry, Strawberry hugged him in her arms. While he could feel the firmness of a little girl's body, he also enjoyed the feeling of being hugged by someone else for a long time. We can't find any clues here. Our next target is Xiao Ding's exhibition hall. Sister Wenhua, isn't Xiao Ding a novel writer? Ah, is that so? I say, can you two be stupid and look at the time and place? The police uncle is coming soon. The three little girls argued as they moved to the exhibition hall where the bronze cauldron was originally located. And, no matter what, Su Xinxing's original goal was achieved. Chapter 164. Hall 7 was where the bronze cauldron was originally placed. Compared to the previous hall where the bowl was placed, this hall's decorations had a more ancient Taoist feel to them. On the display stand, there were ancient Taoist items such as a horsetail whisk, 3 clear bells, pill cauldrons, and so on. Therefore, it was not strange for the bronze cauldron to be displayed here. Sister Wenhua, where do you think that thing was originally placed on display? Barry looked at the variety of exhibits and couldn't help but feel dazzled. That empty stage. Wenhua tilted her head and guessed with uncertainty. Correct. Su Xinxing nodded imperceptibly. Because the museum was closed after the theft, without any other exhibits, the empty stand was the display case where the bronze cauldron was placed. As expected, I can't see anything just by looking at it. Barry stared at the display case for a while before finally giving up and rubbing her eyes. At this time, we need sesame paste. Wenhua hugged Su Xinxing and pushed him onto the display case. Just like with the bowl, Su Xinxing couldn't feel anything strange here. Even if he put down his human pride and tried to sniff around like the cat, he still couldn't find anything. Also, in the Girona dwarf village, he confirmed that the culprit didn't steal the bronze cauldron. Then, could it be that the culprit was someone else? But since the crime notice specifically arranged the time, then the culprit should be the same person. Even sesame paste is unable to find any clues. That sure is a headache. Wenhua crossed her arms before her chest and frowned like an adult. She looked incredibly cute. So, it is still the work of an unconfirmed creature. I think it's more likely that it's an alien. Barry didn't back down and said, even Sister Wenhua can't do that. Looking at the two arguing again, Xinghua and Su Xinxing couldn't help but sigh. At this time, footsteps came from outside the door. Not good, the police are here. Xinghua immediately stopped her two sisters who were still bickering. Then, she pulled them into a red wooden cupboard whose purpose was unknown. Are the kids and the cat here? The police's voice came from outside the cupboard. Judging from the change in the source of the voice, they should be patrolling this room. No, there's not even a shadow of a ghost here. Another policeman's voice rang out, and then their conversation gradually faded away, as if they had left. Wenhua let out a sigh of relief. Just as she was about to leave, she was pulled back by Xinghua. Not only that, Xinghua even placed her index finger on Wenhua's lips, telling her not to speak. After a while, the voices of the two policemen came from the door again. All right, it seems like no one is here. Then let's hurry to the next exhibition hall. If we can't find them, Big Sister Tenghua will go crazy again. This time, their voices could be considered to have truly faded into the distance. To actually play such a trick on a few elementary school girls, those two fellows were too low for the police. In addition, Apricot Blossom was able to see through the plan of the two adults. Considering her age, this was already very impressive. Why do I feel like the policemen are patrolling more and more carefully? Barry muttered as she stretched her arms. Because Mom looks scary when she's angry, Apricot Blossom answered casually, and continued to search for clues. To this, Su Xinxing could only not comment, and continued to search for clues. But since he had already looked at the cupboard for a while, he knew that it was meaningless to rely on magic to detect the remnants of the magic. The only thing he could do now was to quickly find the traces left behind by the real culprit to determine the truth. At this time, Su Shenxing suddenly noticed the cupboard that they were hiding in. If his memory was correct, the first time he visited this place, he didn't remember seeing that weird cupboard. In other words, it was moved here during this period of time. And there was another strange point. Why didn't anyone show any reaction when they saw this strange mahogany cupboard? The girls had hidden inside naturally and didn't have any questions about why there was a box here. The policemen were also blind. They didn't even notice such a big and obvious thing. This was really illogical. In other words, the mystery was on the cupboard. Thus, Su Shenxing gave up on the cupboard, and began to explore the weird mahogany cupboard. He didn't look inside the cupboard, and it was dark just now, but it was different now. After adapting to the darkness, Su Shenxing realized that his feline vision allowed him to clearly see the inside of the cupboard. But to be honest, there wasn't much to see, it was just an ordinary cupboard. If there was anything different, it would be that on the side of the cupboard, there was a button that looked like an elevator. It started from the B floor, which was the basement floor, and went to the 10th floor, which was the highest floor, which was 21 floors in total. Meow, why is there such a button in the cupboard? This is too suspicious. It was almost certain that this thing was the main part of the puzzle. But even so, Su Shenxing wasn't good at this kind of thing. If he wanted to talk to the three little girls, mainly Apricot Blossom, just the fact that the cat could talk, and the voice was that of a man, was enough to scare them. Meow, wait a minute, elevator, could it be the so-called elevator game? Suddenly, Su Shenxing remembered a horror movie he had seen before. He couldn't remember the specific name, but Su Shenxing still remembered some of the classic scenes, such as some ghost games. After all, after reaching his level of strength, there weren't many things that could make him feel creepy. Regardless of whether he guessed correctly or not, he would test it out first. It didn't cost him money to try anyway. Meow, I remember it was the 4th floor at first. After hesitating for a moment, Su Shenxing didn't lead the girls over. He just slapped the meatball on the cat's paw on the button with the word "C" written on it. The LED light in the button flashed and disappeared. It also didn't have the sense of weightlessness or ascension that was unique to elevators. It felt like a low-quality toy from a street stall. But now, there was no time to regret. Meow, in short, after the 4th floor is the 2nd floor. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.